Chapter 554. Who are you? The bailiff from the Ministry of Justice turned around and asked Yang Luqing coldly. Yang Luqing looked at him and said faintly, "Yesterday when Mr. Chen came here, I was there too. I was the one who fought with him." The officer narrowed his eyes and said, "If that's the case, then take him away as well." The bailiffs behind her were holding shackles and chains in their hands. Just as they were about to step forward, Yang Luqing raised her hand to stop them. She looked at them and asked, "Do you have the arrest warrant from the Ministry of Justice?" One of the officers' face darkened and he said in a low voice, "How dare you? How dare you question the Ministry of Justice?" Yang Liuqing's voice grew colder. "If you don't have it, then put away your tricks. Do you really think you can do whatever you want just because you're from the Ministry of Justice?" The leading officer's eyes flashed. He didn't expect this woman to know the Ministry of Justice's procedures so well. There were countless people watching the Ministry of Justice, so he couldn't go too far. Finally, he waved his hand and said, "It's just a summons. There's no need to shackle them. Take them away." Yang Liuqing looked behind him and saw that two people were missing. He turned around and said to Zhang Zumo with a smile, "Don't worry, Miss Zhang. It'll be fine. Let's go." "That Chen is dead?" Zhang Zumo's expression was still a bit dazed. Although she didn't have a good impression of Chen, she still felt a bit complicated when she saw a living person die just like that. The main hall of the Ministry of Justice. The words "Mirror of Eminence" were hung high in the hall. More than 10 officers stood on two sides. As the chief judge, Assistant Minister Zhao sat in the main seat with a gloomy expression. The faces of the two attendants were filled with doubt. The Ministry of Justice was usually busy. Unless the emperor personally ordered it, they were usually only responsible for the review of major cases. It was extremely rare to hear a case in court like this. However, this case was different. The son of the minister counselor of the Ministry of Rights was poisoned to death. Coincidentally, the Chen family had a close relationship with the public house of Chen. Early this morning, the public house had pressured the Ministry of Justice. Otherwise, this kind of case would have been handed over to the local government. Why would the Ministry of Justice personally take over? If one were to look deeper into the matter, the Ministry of Justice had actually stretched their hand a little too far this time. The Assistant Minister of Justice asked with a solemn face, "What's the result of the autopsy?" A white-haired old man stepped forward and said, "Sir, the deceased died of poisoning. There were bruises on his chest, but there were no fatal wounds on his body. A silver needle dipped in poison, as thin as a hair, was removed from his right arm. The time of death was between yesterday night and this morning. Based on this, the time of poisoning should be between yesterday afternoon and the 5th hour. My poor child, who did this to him? My lord, you must uphold justice for us." The tears on the face of a woman sitting at the side had yet to dry. At this time, she could not help but cry bitterly. Assistant Minister Zhao glanced at her and said, "Madam Chen, this official can understand your feelings, but this is the main hall of the Ministry of Justice. Please be quiet and do not disturb this official's investigation." "Come, help the madam out," a middle-aged man beside the woman said in a low voice. A middle-aged man next to the woman said in a low voice. Two maidservants immediately walked out and supported the woman as she left. "I'll leave everything to Sir Zhao," he said after taking a deep breath and clasping his hands at Assistant Minister Zhao. The reason he was able to sit here and listen today was because of the face of the Duke's public house. Otherwise, the Ministry of Justice would not give him any face as he was just a small minister counselor. Assistant Minister Zhao nodded and slapped the gavel. Looking at the people kneeling in front of the hall, he asked, "This official asks you, from yesterday afternoon to the 7th hour, where did your young master go?" A few of the servants who had been following young Master Chen heard the sound of the gavel and couldn't help but tremble. One of the servants immediately replied, "Replying to my lord, the young master was at the Spring Fragrance Pavilion yesterday. When it was about midnight, he went to the Willow Lane to find Miss Zhang. After that, he stayed at the Spring Fragrance Pavilion until evening." When these words were said, even the bailiffs at the side couldn't help but laugh. This Chen was really interesting, treating the brothel as if it was his own home. Assistant Minister Zhao furrowed his brows and said, "Bring all the relevant personnel here." A bailiff below replied, "Sir, Zhang Zumo of Willow Alley has not arrived yet, but the madam of the Spring Fragrance Pavilion and the girls who had contact with Chen have all been brought here." Those. Just as everyone was mulling over this phrase, They saw a gorgeously dressed middle-aged woman walk in from the outside with more than a dozen coquettish women. These people. Assistant Minister Zhao furrowed his brows and asked, "These people are all?" The bailiff said somewhat helplessly, "Sir, these girls are the ones who had contact with Chen yesterday. Then the madam, also had contact with him." The bailiff's expression was somewhat awkward. He couldn't help but glance at the madam, his stomach rolling. The face of the middle-aged man listening at the side twitched. Assistant Minister Zhao stilled, but before he could speak, the madam knelt down with a thud and sobbed, "Sir, you have wronged me." Even if this servant had all the courage in the world, this servant would not dare to harm Chen. Moreover, Chen is one of the top financial backers of our pavilion. This servant can't wait to welcome him. How could he? Assistant Minister Zhao said coldly. This official has not asked a question. How can you shout in court? If you say another word, drag her away and give her 20 strokes of the paddle. The madam's throat seemed to be strangled, and her voice came to a sudden stop. Assistant Minister Zhao looked at her and said, "From the moment young Master Chen first stepped into the Spring Fragrance Pavilion yesterday, tell this official in detail everything that happened." In detail? The madam stilled and asked uncertainly, "What? Do you still have something you want to hide?" Assistant Minister Zhao looked coldly at her and asked in a cold voice. No. The brothel keeper's expression changed and she immediately said, Xiang, quick, young Master Chen is calling you first. You go first. Lian, Hua, Fei, the three of you are calling him second. Hurry up and prepare. The three. Among the 2 rows of bailiffs, someone smacked his lips, an envious expression on his face. In the Ministry of Justice, the door of a certain guardroom slowly opened, and a fatigued Lu Yizhong walked out. After reading through the files for another night, he still hadn't found any useful clues. At this time, his head was slightly dizzy. The minister had claimed illness and was resting at home. He would probably have to wait until he returned before he could read those files that had already been sealed. In the next few days, he would temporarily focus his attention on the Supreme Court. Official Lu. Seeing him walk out, a person at the door immediately bowed. Let's go. Lu Yizhong waved his hand and walked out. That person waved at someone nearby and said, You guys leave. At the door of the Ministry of Justice's main hall, a few people turned their heads. When they saw the 2 people walking out, their expressions were somewhat regretful. They reached out to adjust the position of something in unison and quickly followed. On the street, Lu Yizhong walked with his head lowered. Behind him, a few people were discussing something in low voices. At a certain moment, he suddenly raised his head and saw a carriage driving over in front of him. A look of shock appeared on his face. Sir. In the main hall of the Ministry of Justice, the bailiffs were all flushed from hearing this. Occasionally, they would secretly stretch out their hands or bend their backs slightly. In the hall, the woman was still talking incessantly. Chen is really amazing. He tormented me for almost an hour. Then he changed 4 positions, and there was Guanyin. Shut up. Assistant Minister Zhao finally couldn't help but scold her angrily. He stared at the woman and moved his hand that was on the wooden block under his body for a moment. He asked, Are you saying that young Master Chen once said that his right arm hurt? The woman nodded repeatedly and said, He said it. When Chen entered the room, he said it, but we didn't pay attention to it at the time. Chen only took off his clothes to take a look. Then I also took off my clothes and then, for positions... Shut up. Assistant Minister Zhao slammed the wooden block and said, All right, take them away first. Although this wave of questioning made him want to die, he had also obtained some useful information. Before the young Master Chen entered the brothel, he had already been poisoned, but the poison had not acted up. With the brothel women as witnesses, this information should not be false and could be used to convince the public. Moreover, the young Master Chen had no grudge against the brothel women. These people also had no motive to kill him. In this case, the murderer was someone else. Have you brought the other suspects? He asked again. Sir, they have arrived, a bailiff below replied. The eyes of the assistant minister flashed and he said, Bring them up. Immediately, a few more figures walked out. Behind them were the bailiffs of the Ministry of Justice. In front of them were 3 women. One of them was tall and had a cold expression. She stood slightly at the front, and the 2 behind her all had pale faces. Miss. Xiao Chui had never seen such a scene. She looked at the bailiffs with sticks in their hands and the dignified official holding Zhang Zimo's hand. Her voice trembled slightly. Seeing the three people standing in the middle of the hall, Assistant Minister Zhao said coldly, "Why don't you kneel before me?" Just as Xiao Chui and Zhang Zimo were about to kneel, Yang Liuqing reached out to support them. He looked up at Assistant Minister Zhao and said, "Why should we kneel?" "HM?" Assistant Minister Zhao's eyes were slightly cold. "Your Jing Kingdom." Yang Liuqing looked at him and said. After realizing that something was wrong, he stopped and said, "The crime has not been determined. The Jing Kingdom does not have a law that forbids kneeling before a trial." "How dare you?" Assistant Minister Zhao's expression changed, and he slammed the gavel down. Yang Liuqing's expression did not change. He only patted Zhang Zimo and Xiao Chui's hands to comfort them. "Sir, he was the one who attacked the young master yesterday and even sent him flying with a kick." A servant of the Chen estate saw Yang Liuqing and immediately pointed him out. "Are there any other witnesses?" Assistant Minister Zhao no longer cared about what the woman had just said because the Jing Kingdom did not have a law that forbids kneeling before a trial. It would be disadvantageous for him to pursue the matter, so he could not let her stall for time. Many people saw what happened yesterday. A bailiff nodded slightly and turned around to shout, "Bring a witness." They saw it. That young master wanted to take liberties with the young lady, but he was beaten up by that heroine. "You mean that young master yesterday?" "He has already looked for that young lady more than 10 times, but he did not even enter the door." "That heroine's martial arts are amazing. She sent several grown men flying with one kick. It was really enjoyable to watch." The crowd eating melon seeds did not hide anything and recounted what they had seen with their own eyes yesterday. "Both the witness and the evidence are here. What else do you have to say?" The assistant minister asked coldly. "You could not stand the young master of the Chen family's harassment, so you decided to poison him to death. You had a motive to kill him, and it also coincided with the time he was poisoned. What else do you have to say?" At the side of the court, the middle-aged man frowned. Although he also wanted to catch the culprit, he had a feeling that the matter was not so simple. Would a mere commoner girl have the guts to poison his son to death? "We did have a conflict with him yesterday, but it had nothing to do with the poisoning. The witness and evidence that Sir spoke of have nothing to do with this matter," Yang Liuqing said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Humph, the evidence is irrefutable, and you still want to deny it. It seems that if I don't let you suffer a little, you will not admit it." Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice snorted coldly and said, "Come, execute them." Xiao Chui's body trembled as she asked in a trembling voice, Miss, what is torture?" Zhang Zimo's face paled. Torture was a punishment specially used on women. It was to pierce holes in a wooden stick and connect them with a string. The victim's fingers would be placed in the middle of the stick and the string would be tightened on both sides. This could easily cripple both hands. She relied on her hands to paint and play the guqin. If, thinking of this, she tightened her grip on Xiao Chui's hand. "Is it too late?" Yang Liuqing looked back and saw that the bailiff had already taken out the instruments of torture. He shook his head slightly and reached into his sleeve. Xiao Chui's face was pale. The moment she saw the instruments of torture, she knew what they were used for. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she still suppressed her fear and stood beside Zhang Zimo. Assistant Minister Zhao stood up from above and said, "I will give you one more chance. If you still do not admit to your crimes, don't blame me for being merciless. If you want to incriminate someone, how do you admit to it?" Zhang Zimo said through gritted teeth. "Use torture." His expression darkened as he threw down a stick. 6 bailiffs walked towards the 3 people. Yang Liuqing sighed softly and took out a piece of silk from his sleeve. Several figures walked out from the outside in a single file. The young man walking at the front looked somewhat thin, and there was a trace of fatigue on his face. However, his voice was powerful and resonant. "The Secret Intelligence Bureau is handling a case. Unauthorized personnel, please leave." The bailiff and the 2 officials from the Ministry of Justice were startled when they saw this. Even the bailiffs holding the instruments of torture did not move. Not to mention that they knew this young man. Just the clothes that they were wearing were enough to intimidate people. They did not dare to make any strange movements. "Louis!" Assistant Minister Zhao looked at him with a dark expression and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Chapter 555. Seeing this scene, Yang Liuqing's eyebrows twitched, and he put the silk back. Zhang Zumo looked at the people who had come in, and her heart relaxed slightly. A hint of color also appeared on Xiao Chui's face. Lu Yizhi glanced at Assistant Minister Zhao and waved his hand. Take away all the people involved. The Secret Intelligence Division will officially take over this case. Wait. Assistant Minister Zhao looked at Lu Yizhi and said, This is a case of my Ministry of Justice. Isn't your Secret Intelligence Division reaching too far? The Secret Intelligence Division only listened to the orders of the Emperor and had an aloof status. It could be said to be a sharp knife hanging over the heads of the officials. They had always acted without any scruples and were not liked by the officials. If they were to take away the people today, the Ministry of Justice would lose all face. What? Does official Zhao have a problem with my Secret Intelligence Division? Lu Yizhi asked. Assistant Minister Zhao was speechless. He naturally could not speak carelessly. His expression became calm again as he looked at Lu Yizhi and asked, Then official Lu, do you have the Emperor's decree? Lu Yizhi lightly said, The Secret Intelligence Division has the responsibility of supervising the officials and handling all cases. There is no need for the Emperor's decree. But the duties of the Secret Intelligence Division do not include interfering with the cases that the Ministry of Justice is trying in court, right? Assistant Minister Zhao looked at him and said, The trial of this case is about to end. If official Lu has any objections, please speak later. Oh, it does not include? A voice came from outside the door. Yang Liuqing's heart finally relaxed. Xiao Chui revealed a joyful expression, and Zhang Zumo also looked over. Assistant Minister Zhao looked over and was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. He bowed and said, This lowly official greets your highness. The people in the hall and the servants of the Ministry of Justice all lowered their heads and knelt down. Emingzu waved her hand. At ease. This lowly official did not know that your highness was coming and did not go out to welcome you. Please forgive me, your highness. No matter what attitude Assistant Minister Zhao had just had, he could only temporarily put down everything at this moment. Otherwise, it would be disrespectful to the princess. The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Rights of the Chen family also stood up and bowed. Emingzu looked at him and said, Today, I heard that such a serious case happened in the capital. Poisoning the relatives of court officials is a terrible thing. I have already asked my father to investigate this matter thoroughly. The Secret Intelligence Department will take over the case, and the Ministry of Justice will temporarily hand over all the files. But your highness. Assistant Minister Zhao paused upon hearing this. Emingzu looked at him and asked, What other questions do you have? Assistant Minister Zhao's expression changed. He lowered his head and said, No. Emingzu nodded and said, Hand over everything related to this case to the Intelligence Department. Li Yi looked at Zhang Zimo and Xiao Huan and nodded slightly. He then said to Lu Yidong, Take them all away. Looking at the hall of the Ministry of Justice that had instantly become empty, Assistant Minister Zhao sighed. He looked at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights and said, Brother Chen, I will not be able to help you with what happens next. It's just a pity. I'm afraid that nephew's grievance is. Official Chen looked at him and asked, Although I am in the Ministry of Rights, I have heard that this Lu Yidong is known as Ghost King Lu. There is no case that he cannot solve. Thus, His Majesty holds him in high regard and promotes him. Brother Zhao, why do you say this? Assistant Minister Zhao smiled and said, The case only happened this morning, and the Ministry of Justice did not delay in the slightest. We immediately started the trial, but not long after, the Secret Intelligence Department arrived. Of the three people just now, one was Her Royal Highness, one was Prince Ning's son, and the other was County Uncle Li, who is deeply trusted by His Majesty. Why would the three of them appear here at the same time? Brother Chen, you don't really think that the Secret Intelligence Department is trying to solve the case, do you? Could it be? Official Chen's expression changed drastically when he heard this. What a pity. Assistant Minister Zhao shook his head and said helplessly. Could it be that they want to protect the murderer of my son? The middle-aged man's expression changed again and immediately became gloomy. I'm afraid that those two women have an inextricable connection with them. Assistant Minister Zhao thought for a moment and said, If I remember correctly, The last time young Duke Qin and Royal Prince Duanyang offended Her Royal Highness, it seemed to be because of a woman surnamed Tsang. And the relationship between County Uncle Li and that woman should. Official Chen should know. Even if I have to give up my official position, I cannot let my son suffer injustice. The middle-aged man's expression was extremely gloomy as he said coldly, "The morning court has not ended. I will go find my colleagues in the Ministry of Rights and enter the palace to seek justice for my son." Assistant Minister Zhao nodded and said righteously, "The Secret Intelligence Department is becoming more and more arrogant. Now, they even dare to interfere with the investigation of the Ministry of Justice. Official Chen, rest assured, I will also contact my colleagues and report them to His Majesty." "Many thanks, Brother Zhao," the middle-aged man said and hurriedly left. Assistant Minister Zhao stood in the hall and watched as the middle-aged man's figure disappeared. He rubbed his chin and a mysterious smile appeared on his face. Go on, the bigger the better." "Uncle Master." Yang Liuqing immediately bowed to Li Yi after walking out of the Ministry of Justice. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "They didn't do anything to you, did they?" Yang Liuqing smiled and said, "Fortunately, Uncle Master came in time." Li Yi nodded and looked back at Sung Zimo, saying, "I already know what happened. Stay in the Secret Intelligence Department for now. Don't worry, nothing will happen." "You." Sang Zimo's lips parted slightly and said, "Be careful." Louis Chong looked at Li Yi and said with cupped hands, "Official, I will take these girls back first. I fear there is something fishy about this case. I will carefully look through the records of the Ministry of Justice." Li Yi nodded and said, "Get ready. I'm afraid we will have to enter the palace in a while." After the people of the Secret Intelligence Department left with Sung Zimo and the others, Li Xian looked back at him and asked with a frown, "Who is framing them?" "It's hard to say, but there are not many people who would sacrifice the son of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights and order an Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice." Li Yi thought about it and said, "It's not against them, it's against me. This Assistant Minister Zhao." Emingzu thought about it and looked at him. "He is usually very close to the King of Shu." "Yes." Li Xian patted his head and said, "The one who hates you the most is, of course, the King of Shu. Because of you, he has become the laughingstock of the entire capital." A thoughtful expression appeared on Li Yi's face. Recently, there had indeed been some strange situations around them, and some evidence did point to the King of Shu. However, he still didn't think that with the intelligence that the King of Shu had displayed in the past, he could have arranged such an incident. However, there was no guarantee that he didn't have someone guiding him behind the scenes. But right now, the most important thing was to get to the bottom of this case and clear their names. As for the King of Shu, after this incident, it was time to give him a big gift. Emingzu nodded and said, "No matter who is behind this should be what the mastermind wants to see. Let's go to the palace. It's still early in the morning, and I'm afraid that they are already prepared. Have you thought about how you are going to explain this to father?" Li Yi shook his head. Everything had happened so suddenly that he could only bring the people out of the Ministry of Justice first. As for the rest, he could only take it one step at a time. In the King of Shu's manner, the King of Shu, who was slowly moving with the help of a maid, heard a servant's report. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and ask, "The son of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights is dead." Li Yi brought the people of the Secret Intelligence Department to rescue the criminal. Now the people of the Ministry of Rights, the Ministry of Justice, and a large group of imperial censors are preparing to enter the palace to impeach him? The servant immediately nodded and said, "Your Highness, I just came back from the Ministry of Justice. The news is confirmed." The King of Shu was stunned again. Then he pushed away the maid who was supporting him and laughed. "Haha, you are courting death. Men, prepare the carriage. I want to enter the palace." After saying that, he strode forward. "Your Highness, your leg." The maid's expression changed and she immediately said, "Thump." The King of Shu fell to the ground, hugging one of his legs. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he gritted his teeth and spat out a few words. "Hurry! Prepare the carriage." Chapter 556. In the Hall of Politics, today's morning court session lasted longer than usual. Although the Qi Kingdom had been intimidated by Tianfa and suffered a rare defeat, as time went by, it seemed that the shadow of Tianfa had gradually dissipated. On the border, there was more friction between the two countries. Other than that, the state of Zhao, which had never had any disputes with the state of Jing, was also beginning to stir. The spies hidden in the two states reported that the state of Qi and the state of Zhao had been in close contact with each other for the past few days. It was feared that they were about to make a move against the state of Jing. The strength of the Zhao kingdom was slightly weaker than that of the Jing kingdom, but it could not be underestimated. If the two countries joined forces, even if there was a sharp weapon like Tianfa, the Jing kingdom would still be in danger. In this way, among the neighboring countries, except for the Wu kingdom, which was still in a deep civil war, the two most powerful countries were hostile to the Jing kingdom. It could be said that they were surrounded by enemies on both sides. Of course, the current Jing kingdom was not the same as before, especially in terms of military strength. Tianfa had been researched into many wonderful uses, and it could suppress the Qi kingdom. Therefore, the Jing kingdom would not be flustered because of this. Moreover, the Qi kingdom and the Zhao kingdom were mostly testing each other. No one dared to launch a real large-scale war. Even so, the imperial court attached great importance to this and made a series of deployments on the border. General Su Dingyuan had rushed to the front line again, and at the same time, he brought a large number of children of the general family with him. With the god of war in Tianfa, there was no need to worry too much in the short term. Emperor Jing looked at the courtiers below and felt satisfied. If it was a year ago, the imperial court would have been in a mess in the current situation. But today, from the courtiers to the common people, they all had confidence in their hearts. When he thought of this, he naturally thought of Li Yi. Over the past few months, although he had been lazy and did not attend to his duties, he had imperceptibly brought about such a great change to the imperial court and the Jing kingdom. Being a county earl was a little stingy. If he still behaved himself and did not cause any trouble after the establishment of the academy was completed, then his title could be promoted again. He could forget about becoming a high duke for the time being. After the founding of the nation, this title would not be given to anyone else. That kid would probably be disappointed, but it was not impossible. However, if he really waited until then, he might not be able to see that kid's days of pride. After coming back to reality, the courtiers below were still standing respectfully in the same place. Emperor Jing cleared his throat and said, "Ministers, do you have anything else to say? If there is nothing, the court will be dismissed today." After a while, no one said anything. Emperor Jing was about to announce it. Just as he was about to announce it, a eunuch of a eunuch, a eunuch, a eunuch, a eunuch walked in from the side of the hall and whispered. Emperor was stunned. He waved and said, "Emperor Jing." The courtiers were all confused. When they turned their heads, they saw several people walking in from outside the hall. Emperor Jing looked at them and said, "Ministers, what do you have to say?" Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhao Guangyuan, accuses County Earl of Chong and Li Yi of overstepping his authority and obstructing the Ministry of Justice from handling the case. Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice stepped forward and said in a deep voice. Chen Yunshan, Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights, accuses County Earl of Chong and Li Yi of covering up the murderer who killed my son and violating the national law. Your Majesty, please investigate. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said with a sad face and a hoarse voice. As soon as the two of them finished speaking, several more people stood up. The officials of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Rights, and several censors listed several crimes of Li Yi, the Earl of Chong and County, vividly described the arrogance and conceit of the Secret Intelligence Department, which immediately resonated with the courtiers. In the court, the Minister of the Ministry of Rights, who had just learned of this matter, immediately stood up and said, "Your Majesty, the trial has always been the business of the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Judiciary. Without Your Majesty's order, the Secret Intelligence Office dared to disturb the justice. I hope Your Majesty will punish them severely." Immediately, other imperial censors strongly condemned and protested the behavior of County Earl of Chong and Li Yi and the Secret Intelligence Office. They talked about the independence of the judiciary. The case was the business of the Ministry of Justice. Although His Majesty could assign the Ministry of Justice to handle it, he could not participate in it. Moreover, the Secret Intelligence Office openly took people from the Ministry of Justice. What was the use of the Ministry of Justice? What was the use of the law? The courtiers had long been dissatisfied with the expansion of the power of the Secret Intelligence Office. At this moment, countless people stood up. The poisoning of the son of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was just a prelude. At this moment, what they wanted was to reduce the power of the Secret Intelligence Office. Emperor Jing frowned when he heard this. The Secret Intelligence Office was an institution that only belonged to him. Although he gave them a high power, he did not abuse it. As for directly taking people from the Ministry of Justice, without his permission, no one dared to do so. Of course, there were always some restless people. When he gave the token of the Secret Intelligence Office to Li Yi, it was to let him act freely in the court. After all, a county was still too small. He also knew his limits. He did not really use this identity to make trouble in the capital, as he said. He did not care why Li Yi directly took people from the Ministry of Justice. It would be abnormal if he did not make trouble one day. What he cared about at this moment was the case. The capital was under the feet of the emperor. In the whole Jing kingdom, there was no place more stable than here. In the past, there were very few murders. The son of an official of the court was poisoned to death. The impact was too bad. Where is Li Yi? Summon him to the palace. Emperor Jing said in a deep voice. I am here. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure appeared outside the hall. The courtiers, including Emperor Jing, did not expect that he was listening outside the hall when everyone was impeaching him. At this moment, the atmosphere in the hall could not help but be a little awkward. Li Yi, Li Xian, and Emingzu entered the hall together. The officials all had different expressions. Just now, everyone naturally mentioned the eldest princess and crown prince Li Xian, but they all unanimously pointed the spear at the county magistrate of Chong and Li Yi. No one would be stupid enough to offend the other two. After all, among the three heroes in the capital, County Magistrate Li was the easiest to bully. Did you hear what they said just now? Emperor Jing looked at him and asked. Li Yi nodded and said, I heard everything. Emperor Jing asked again, Then do you have anything to say? When the courtiers heard this, their first reaction was actually worry. They were worried that he would say, I am guilty, I know I am wrong again. Then he would be too ashamed to see His Majesty and resign in advance, leaving the arithmetic school in a mess. After all, it was not the first time he had done this kind of thing. I have something to say. Li Yi cleared his throat and said, In Jingdo, to murder a relative of a court official is a vile act. If the murderer is not caught, where is the dignity of the court? Where is the emperor's dignity? How can we give an explanation to the people of the capital? The Secret Intelligence Bureau receives the emperor's salary and shares the emperor's worries. In order not to delay the best time to solve the case, the Secret Intelligence Bureau sent someone to the palace to report to His Majesty and immediately went to investigate. Report to His Majesty? The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice stood up and immediately said, This is clearly sophistry. If it has been reported to His Majesty, why does His Majesty not know about it until now? Emperor Jing looked at Li Yi and thought for a moment. He looked back at Changda and asked, Just now, you said that the Secret Intelligence Bureau had an urgent report. Because I was discussing the war with the officials, it was delayed. What is it? Li Yi was still thinking about what reason he should use to explain this matter, and was slightly startled when he heard this. A trace of doubt appeared on Changda's face. However, after all, he had followed His Majesty for decades. The next moment, he stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the Secret Intelligence Bureau said that there was a major murder case in the capital and reported to His Majesty for investigation. Since that is the case, it is not overstepping. Emperor Jing said. His voice suddenly turned gloomy. Such a serious case, I will definitely investigate it strictly. He did not expect this kind of operation. Li Yi raised his head and glanced at the old emperor. He suddenly felt that his worldview had been refreshed. He originally wanted Her Highness to give a false testimony, but now even this step was saved. Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice was also startled, but he did not suspect that His Majesty would lie. It seemed that impeaching the other party was somewhat impossible. He gritted his teeth and said, Your Majesty, investigating cases has always been the job of the Ministry of Justice. The Secret Intelligence Bureau is not legitimate. Your Majesty should respect the system and the ancestors. The justice cannot be messed up. Ministry of Justice? Li Yi shook his head and forced a smile at the corner of his mouth. Hee hee. Hee hee. This was originally a laugh. However, from County Uncle Li's hee hee, the courtiers actually heard ridicule, disdain, helplessness, sympathy, and even, go to hell. Of course, they could also understand these feelings. This was because the rate of solving cases in the Ministry of Justice was really pitifully low. Some time ago, His Majesty sent people from the Secret Intelligence Bureau to the Ministry of Justice to review the files. Who knew how many old, false and erroneous cases had been dug out, which really made the Ministry of Justice gain a lot of face among the 6 ministries. The reason why the Minister of Justice had recently resigned due to illness was probably partly because of shame. On the other hand, the Secret Intelligence Bureau's King of Hell Lu was famous. He had repeatedly solved strange cases. Even the big shots in the court had heard of his name. Not only that, the resources controlled by the Secret Intelligence Bureau were far from what the Ministry of Justice could compare with. Things like solving a case were also a piece of cake. If His Majesty was serious, he could even investigate how many times the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice had slept with his concubine at night. From the point of view of the Secret Intelligence Bureau, County Uncle Lee's hee-hee was not wrong. Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice, who understood the meaning behind this hee-hee, quickly blushed. If this wasn't the Imperial Court, he would definitely fight with this arrogant County Uncle Lee for 300 rounds. Chapter 557. Your Majesty, this case cannot be handed over to the Secret Intelligence Department. When all the officials were silent, the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights stood up and said in a deep voice, Mr. Lee has a close relationship with the woman involved in the case, and Mr. Lee is a member of the Secret Intelligence Department. In order to avoid suspicion, Your Majesty, please hand the case back to the Ministry of Justice. I believe that the Ministry of Justice will give me justice. As the father of the victim in the case, he was the most qualified to speak. Emperor Jing looked at Li Yi and asked, Is it true? The Secret Intelligence Department is handling the case. I did not intervene. The Secret Intelligence Department is His Majesty's Secret Intelligence Department. Doubting the Secret Intelligence Department is doubting His Majesty. Li Yi turned his eyes and asked, Are you doubting His Majesty's justice? I dare not. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, so he immediately bowed and said. Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, In that case, the case will be handed over to the Supreme Court. Lu Yi will assist in the investigation. Where is the Chancellor of the Supreme Court? I am here. Among the officials, a middle-aged man immediately stood up. Li Yi frowned slightly. This case was definitely not done by Zheng Zimo and the others. The reason why he saved them from the Ministry of Justice was that he was worried that they would suffer during the trial. If it was the Supreme Court, everything would be out of control. One of his shoulders was touched. Li Xian turned his head and whispered, Don't worry, Chancellor of the Supreme Court. Our people guarantee that your Miss Zhang will live more comfortably there than in the Secret Intelligence Department. The reputation of the Ministry of Justice was too bad, and the Secret Intelligence Department could not stop everyone from talking. There was no objection to handing over the case to the Supreme Court. Even the Minister of Justice and the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights did not speak again. Emperor Jing said to the eunuchs below, Where is Lu Yi? Let him immediately hand over the case to the Supreme Court and assist them in handling it. As soon as he finished speaking, another eunuch came in and said loudly, Your Majesty, Lord Lu Yi requests to see you. Today's court was really strange. Whoever was summoned by His Majesty arrived. The efficiency was amazing. Emperor Jing was also stunned for a moment, but then he waved his hand and said, Let him in. Greetings, Your Majesty. Lu Yi walked in and bowed. Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, You heard what I said just now. I order you to assist the Supreme Court and solve this case within 3 days. Ahem, Your Majesty. Lu Yi raised his head, looked at Emperor Jing and said, Your Majesty, this case has been solved. There is no need to trouble the Supreme Court anymore. As soon as these words came out, there was a moment of silence in the court. It had only been a few hours since the incident occurred, and it had only been less than 2 hours since the Secret Intelligence Division took the suspect away from the Ministry of Justice. In such a short time, the case had been solved. Was the Ghost King Lu of the Secret Intelligence Division really that terrifying? When Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice heard this, he also paused, a look of disbelief appearing on his face. Just now, in the main hall of the Ministry of Justice, they had already narrowed down the scope of the culprit very much and had almost locked onto the 3 women. Could it be that the Intelligence Division had directly convicted that woman? He was shocked because he knew that the Secret Intelligence Division would not do so. Who is the murderer? After Jing Di regained his senses, he immediately looked at him and asked. Lu Yi smiled and said, "This matter is not urgent. Let me tell you slowly." Li Xian nudged Li Yi again and whispered, "Your subordinate has taught well." He had taught him everything that should be taught. It had to be said that in some matters, Lu Yi had never let him down. Speak. At this time, Emperor Jing was also interested. Before that, Your Majesty, please take a look at the interrogation file of the Ministry of Justice this morning. Lu Yi took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and handed it to the eunuch beside him. The eunuch walked up and handed the paper to Emperor Jing. Emperor Jing looked at it for a moment and frowned. There is no witness and material evidence. How can there be conclusive evidence? I have already ordered that the Ministry of Justice and the local authorities should not use torture when handling cases. Is this how the Ministry of Justice handles cases? Many officials looked at each other. His Majesty was dissatisfied with the Ministry of Justice. Ever since Lu Yi was in charge of the old cases of the Ministry of Justice, the problems of the Ministry of Justice were exposed. According to His Majesty's temperament, after this matter, he would probably take some measures against the Ministry of Justice. The expression of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice changed and he immediately said, "Your Majesty, that woman despised the court, and all the evidence points to those women. If we do not use torture, it will be difficult to investigate the case." Ha. Lu Yi looked at him and said, "Assistant Minister Zhao, remember what you said now." Assistant Minister Zhao felt very uncomfortable when he heard the word, ha. But at this moment, he could only swallow his anger. At this time, Lu Yi continued, "This morning, the son of official Chen of the Ministry of Rights died in his own home. After an examination, it was concluded that he died of poisoning. After the testimony of many witnesses, it was generally confirmed that the time of Chen's poisoning was yesterday in the evening. What was Chen doing in the evening? He had just drunk some wine and went to Willow Alley to find a girl with the surname of Chen. According to the servants of the Chen family, Chen had been pestering this Miss Zheng a lot these days and wanted to take her as a concubine. However, this Miss Zheng was unwilling. Yesterday, Chen was rude after drinking and had a conflict with Miss Zheng. The time when he was poisoned was around this time. Based on this, the Ministry of Justice deduced that Miss Zheng and the others were the culprits. It is not unreasonable. After Lu Yi finished speaking, he smiled again and said, "However, everyone may not know that the cause of the conflict between young Duke Qin and Royal Prince Duanyang with the princess was actually this Miss Zheng." When Lu Yi said this, everyone naturally thought of the matter that caused a huge commotion last time. Because of this, many of the heirs of the families of the ministers were still lying in bed recovering from their injuries. Young Duke Qin was flirting with an innocent family in the capital and was seriously injured by a passing hero. The person he wanted to flirt with was this Miss Zheng. The reason for the conflict with the princess was because they saw Miss Zheng in Drunken Moon Pavilion and wanted to take revenge. However, they did not know that Her Royal Highness was also there at the time and suffered a great loss. After the investigation of the Secret Intelligence Division, it was found that there were indeed some unrelated people waiting by Miss Zheng's side these days. At this moment, Lu Yi did not need to continue speaking. Which one of the people present was not an old fox? How could an ordinary woman have the guts to poison the son of an official and act as if nothing had happened after poisoning him? At this moment, many people could smell the scent of a conspiracy. An ordinary woman having the guts to poison the son of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights was an unbelievable thing. However, after Lu Yi's reminder, everyone realized that this woman did not seem to be an ordinary woman. An ordinary woman did not have the ability to incur the hatred of these people. Moreover, based on the current situation, this woman seemed to have some relationship with the Earl of Chong and Li Yi. If the scope was expanded, the people who had enmity with the Earl of Chong and, after the previous incident, Royal Prince Duanyang, young Duke Qin, and many other playboys in the capital all hated them to the bone. And the one who hated the Earl of Chong and the most was none other than the King of Shu. And the Ministry of Justice's investigation was so sloppy. Not to mention the Emperor, even they could not stand it. There must be something fishy going on. The younger generation of the few families, even Qin Yu, would not dare to plot to kill the son of an official and affect the dignified assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. So who could it be? It was terrifying to think about it. At this point, many people did not dare to think about it anymore. There must be more to this matter. The Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights' face suddenly darkened. The pain of losing his son had indeed filled his heart with anger, but it did not mean that he had lost all his rationality. Putting himself in her shoes, how could a mere commoner woman have the guts to do such a thing? You're saying that someone deliberately framed her? At this time, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice raised his eyebrows and questioned. But at that time, other than those three women, there was no one else present. Could it be that someone could poison them from afar and then frame them? Lu Yi looked at him and asked, Assistant Minister Zhao, are you sure that there was no one else present at that time? Chapter 558. Besides the three of them, who else was there? The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice sneered and said, There were many people present yesterday. They could be summoned at any time. Lord Lu, be careful with your words. The servants of the Chen family, Emperor Jing said with a frown. His voice was not loud, but the courtiers nearby heard it. Servants of the Chen family? How is that possible? Many people asked doubtfully. Why would mere servants want to poison the young master of the Chen family? Who gave them the courage to do so? This was even more unbelievable than the woman surnamed Zhang being the murderer. Lord Lu, are you joking? This is the Golden Palace Hall. His Majesty and the other officials are watching. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice finally relaxed and said sarcastically, Lord Li once taught me that the murderer is not as stupid as we think. They often hide very well. All kinds of evidence point to the fact that the person who most resembles the murderer is often not the real murderer. Lu Yizhi turned around and cupped his hands at Li Yi. Then, he turned back again and said with a smile, And those who seem to have the least motive to kill and are the least likely to be the murderer are often the most suspicious. Most people in the court only knew that there was a ghost King Lu in the Secret Service who was excellent at investigating cases. They did not expect him to say such words at this moment. Could it be that this ghost King Lu was taught by County Uncle Li? Of course, there were also a few people, including Prime Minister Qin, who knew that County Uncle Li Yi of Chong and was very accomplished in interrogation. This Lu Yizhi was taught by him when he was still the county lieutenant of Anxi. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice was stunned for a moment and said coldly, What kind of nonsense is this? Lu Yizhi's eyes gradually froze until the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice felt a little scared. Then he said coldly, Lord Zhao can doubt me, but you cannot doubt the truth. He took out another item from his sleeve and handed it to the eunuch. He said, This is the confession of the servants of the Chen family. Please give it to His Majesty. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice said quickly, His Majesty, the Secret Service must have tortured the servants of the Chen family. This testimony cannot be easily trusted. Shut up. Lu Yi suddenly turned his head and said in a cold voice, Do you think that everyone handles a case like your Ministry of Justice? Without severe punishment, there is no way to try a case. Official Zhao, if you have the time to worry about the authenticity of this testimony, why don't you worry more? In a moment, how are you going to explain the origin of the 100,000 taels of silver in the secret room under your bed? You. Assistant Minister Zhao's expression changed greatly. In that instant, his face paled. He pointed a trembling finger at Lu Yizhong, but he could not say another word. 100,000 taels. Hearing this number, many people in the court paled. It would be impossible for a mere assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice to save 100,000 taels of silver with his monthly salary and daily expenses. In fact, although the officials standing here looked very impressive, in terms of wealth, many of them belonged to the ranks of the poor. Their monthly salary had to support the entire household, so how could they save less than 100,000 taels? At the same time, the gazes with which they looked to Lu Yi gradually became filled with fear. The terror of the Secret Intelligence Bureau was to be able to infiltrate the home of an assistant minister without anyone noticing. Perhaps his own home. Thinking of this, many people's backs became slightly wet. Your Majesty, the Secret Intelligence Bureau has long received a report that Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhao Guangyuan, accepted a large amount of bribes, practiced favoritism, foolishly judged the case, and had no regard for human life. It was only today that we found out that in a secret room under Zhao Guangyuan's bed, there were more than 100,000 taels of silver and countless jewels. Before Lu Yizhong finished speaking, Assistant Minister Zhao, who was already paralyzed on the ground, trembled and cried out, Your Majesty, this official is guilty. Someone gave this official 50,000 taels of silver this morning, and told this official to investigate this case. He also said that the evidence is conclusive. When the time comes, the Ministry of Justice only needs to go to that woman's house to find the poison needle. He said that the more this case becomes, the better. The 100,000 taels of silver was placed under the bed. This official was afraid. This official did not even dare to spend a single copper coin. Your Majesty, please spare my life. The Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at Assistant Minister Zhao in a daze. He could not help but take a few steps back, his face extremely pale. Jing Di's expression was gloomy as he coldly said, "Who ordered you to do this? Speak." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, this official really does not know. The person they sent was masked. This official really does not know who it is." At this moment, regarding this case, almost all the officials in the imperial court had a plan in mind. Sure enough, it was a frame-up. The person behind the scenes was really generous. He poisoned the son of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights, and even bribed the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Now, he wanted to make the matter bigger. Who did he want to implicate? Everyone could not help but look at County Uncle Lee. This person was really scheming. This matter was far from what those playboys could participate in. The possibility of it being Prime Minister Qin was not high. It was also impossible for it to be the Chen family. After all, the deceased was from the Chen family. Then, could it be the Cui family? Prince Hui? Or could it be the others? Or? Everyone shook their heads. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice was originally the King of Shu's man. Lord Chen of the Ministry of Rights was also one of the King of Shu's supporters. If it was really him, this was too. Of course, although it was hard to believe, this possibility could not be ruled out. On one side of the hall, Li Yi leaned against a pillar. Li Xian quietly leaned over and asked, "Tell me honestly, is there anyone from your secret intelligence office in my prince's mansion?" Li Yi shook his head and replied casually, "I don't know. You have to ask your Uncle Huang." Li Xian's face lit up again as he said, "The Secret Intelligence Division is very impressive. I'll go talk to Uncle Huang someday and see if he can get me a plate too." "Take him away." Emperor Jing said in a deep voice, "The case of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhao Guangyuan, will be handed over to the Supreme Court. You must investigate it thoroughly." "Yes, Your Majesty." The officer of the Supreme Court immediately stood up and said. Emperor Jing looked at Louis Zhong again and asked, "Have you found out who the mastermind is?" Louis Zhong shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, the two servants of the Chen family only took the money to do things. They know nothing about other things." "Investigate." Emperor Jing opened his mouth again. His voice was extremely cold. After a series of orders, Emperor Jing suddenly asked, "You didn't use torture. How did you make them confess?" Louis Zhong was stunned for a moment and said, "This method was taught to me by Lord Li. The case of Chen's poisoning is unlikely to be done by one person. The possibility of an accomplice is very high. I just locked the servants in different rooms and told them that no matter who is the main culprit or the accomplice, the first person to confess will be spared from death. If another person confesses first, the one who did not confess will be executed by 1,000 cuts." Louis Zhong said lightly, "Then the accomplice confessed. P.S. Readers who have doubts about this can search Prisoner's Dilemma on Baidu. I will not repeat it here. This method was first proposed in 1950. Even though many of the courtiers were experts at playing mind games, when they heard Louis Zhong say these words lightly and carefully pondered, they could not help but feel a chill from their tailbones. Although this could also be considered as an interrogation technique, it was clearly a level higher than torture. King of Hell Lu, he had almost played with people's hearts to a certain extreme. Chapter 559. The King of Shu had just sprained his ankle a few days ago. At this moment, he was supported by two servants and limped towards the political hall. "Your Highness, please slow down." The imperial physician said that Your Highness should focus on recuperation these days and avoid walking. The servant said worriedly. The King of Shu waved his hand and said righteously, "Why slow down? There was a murder case in the Chen family. Someone wanted to play favoritism and protect the suspect. Minister Councillor Chen is loyal to I. If I stand by and do nothing, won't I disappoint him and the other officials in the court?" The servant thought that the King of Shu was just trying to hit County Uncle Li when he was down. When he heard the news, he hurried over and showed an expression of being touched by the King of Shu. Hurry up. The morning court assembly is about to end. The King of Shu tidied his clothes and was about to walk up the stairs. The morning court assembly had been delayed until very late. If it was delayed any longer, he might not be able to see some interesting scenes. At this moment, the sound of noisy footsteps could be heard from within the hall. The court assembly is ending? Seeing this, the King of Shu was startled and showed some disappointment. At the same time, hundreds of officials walked out of the hall with different expressions. Many things had happened in the morning court assembly today. The son of the minister counselor of the Ministry of Rights was poisoned to death. Assistant Minister Zhao of the Ministry of Justice took a huge amount of bribes and played favoritism. County Uncle Li was implicated. The mastermind behind the scenes had yet to be revealed. Of course, the terror of the Secret Intelligence Bureau had once again refreshed the bottom line in their hearts. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice was really finished this time. Not only that, from the last few words of the Emperor, it could be speculated that this time the Ministry of Justice would usher in a major change of personnel. Lu Yi would temporarily take the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Among the 6 ministries, Zhao Guangyuan, who originally belonged to the King of Shu and Prime Minister Qin and was likely to become the Minister of the Ministry of Justice in the future, would face the double investigation of the Supreme Court and the Secret Intelligence Bureau. No one knew how many officials would be involved. As for the person who manipulated everything behind the scenes with the corruption of Zhao Guangyuan, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, to frame County Uncle Li and poison the son of the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Rights, although he still didn't show up and didn't leave too many traces or clues, the officials knew that except for a limited number of people, no one had the motive or ability to do such a thing. Everyone had seen the conflict between County Earl Li and the King of Shu. Of course, they were the ones who wanted to get rid of him. However, the King of Shu was less likely to be the culprit, because the Chen family was also on the King of Shu's side. In order to make trouble for Mr. Li, the King of Shu killed a young master of the Chen family and an assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. Ordinary people wouldn't do such a thing that harmed others without benefiting themselves. The King of Shu shouldn't hate Mr. Li that much, right? When the courtier in front was about to walk down the steps, he was blocked by someone. The one blocking their way was the King of Shu. After a short moment of shock, an official immediately bowed and said respectfully, "Your Highness, the King of Shu." The King of Shu put away the disappointment on his face and nodded. He asked, "I heard that the son of Lord Chen of the Ministry of Rights was killed and the Secret Intelligence Office shielded the suspect. What's the result?" At this time, his face was full of righteousness. He thought to himself that he had seen a lot of schemes of emperors in the past 2 days. At this moment, it was the best time to win people's hearts. The official looked up at the King of Shu with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. After a while he said in a low voice, "This case has been solved by the Secret Intelligence Office." When he finished speaking, the courtiers behind him looked at the King of Shu in a different way. Solved. The King of Shu was stunned when he heard this. More officials had already walked out from the opposite side. Prime Minister Qin didn't show any expression on his face. He looked at the King of Shu suspiciously and left directly. The Minister Counselor of the Ministry of Rights was pale and had a complicated look in his eyes. He didn't even salute. When he passed by the King of Shu, his whole body bent. When half of the courtiers passed by him, he felt the different kinds of eyes and strange expressions of the people. The King of Shu's face showed confusion. "They are all. What's wrong?" "Thank you, Your Majesty." In a garden behind Lijing Hall, Li Yi bowed to Emperor Jing. "You don't have to thank me." Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "You are now a county uncle. How could you be schemed against like this? Can you be a little more careful and cause less trouble for me?" Li Yi wanted to say that he was also very helpless. He didn't provoke anyone. In the last 2 times, he was bullied and had to defend himself passively. The other time, he couldn't control his domineering aura at will. Did the other party have to be so ruthless? Emperor Jing waved his hand and interrupted him. He said, "Do you know who is behind this matter?" "I don't know for the time being." Li Yi shook his head. Even Lu Yizhong didn't find any clues. In his heart, he only had a few guesses. But those guesses were not suitable to be said on this occasion. You are still a little reckless in this matter. I will let the Supreme Judiciary and the Secret Intelligence Department thoroughly investigate this matter. Emperor Jing looked at him and said, I have handed the Ministry of Justice to Liu Yizhong. You also help me to keep an eye on it. One of the 6 ministries should be so corrupt. I can't escape the blame. After saying a few words, Emperor Jing sat down in the pavilion. He covered his chest and an abnormal blush appeared on his face. He said, You go back first. Then he thought of something and said, In the future when you play chess with Shanning, you are not allowed to cheat. If I don't cheat, I can't play. Li Yi sighed in his heart. The arrogant Lolita was stupid and cute in other aspects, but she was talented in chess. As a teacher, if he lost to his student, how could he save his face? He didn't know how the old emperor was born. Except for the king of Shu, his sons and daughters were all better than the other. No wonder he was so unpopular. When he walked out of the garden, Li Xian came up to him and asked him to wait for him at the palace gate. Before he reached the palace gate, he chased him from behind and waved the token in his hand as if showing off. He asked, Can the Secret Intelligence Department enter the Ministry of Works at will and read the drawings? Li Yi waved his hand. The Secret Intelligence Department can't, but you can. He could even give the token of the Secret Intelligence Department's commander, so the drawings of the Ministry of Works were nothing. Li Xian put away the token and said seriously, This time, the Chui family and King Hui are the most likely culprits, and the King of Shu is also very likely. Prime Minister Qin can't let Qin Yu do whatever he wants. If you find anything, you must tell me. Don't act rashly. Don't worry. Li Yi waved his hand and said. There were many things to do next, so there was no time to waste here. Zheng Zumo and Yang Liuqing should have returned home by now. This time, they must have been very shocked. He had to ask the Secret Intelligence Department to send more people to keep an eye on that place. Although no matter who was behind the scenes, they probably wouldn't make any moves in the short term. But if they could easily poison the son of the Minister of Rights, it was hard to say that they wouldn't do something even more outrageous in their madness. He went to Willow Alley first. The people from the Secret Intelligence Department had already sent them home. Wan Ruoqing had also returned. It wasn't until she saw Li Yi that the worried expression on her face disappeared. Li Yi didn't stay there for long, because there were more important things to do next. The twists and turns that could affect the entire court only lasted a few hours. However, although it seemed calm on the surface, no one knew how many unseen undercurrents were surging inside. Other than that, the King of Shu also had a lot of complaints about the person behind the scenes. After this incident, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhao Guangyuan, was probably finished. He would no longer have anyone to use in the Ministry of Justice, and his support in the Imperial Court would also decrease. Recently, everything had not been going well, and it was all because of that damned Li Yi. Your Highness, there is one more thing, but I don't know if I should say it or not. A trace of hesitation appeared on the servant's face. Why are you stuttering? Speak. The King of Shu was in a bad mood at this time, so he glanced at him and said. The servant thought for a moment and said, Outside, there is a rumor that this incident was secretly ordered by your Highness. What? The King of Shu's expression changed, and he suddenly stood up from his seat. What did you say? Qin Mansion. Prime Minister Qin sat on the main seat, and there were many figures below. Although they were all dressed in casual clothes, if one looked carefully, they would recognize many familiar faces in the imperial court. Prime Minister Qin was a veteran of 3 dynasties, and he had a wide influence in the imperial court. Because he had always supported the King of Shu, Prime Minister Qin's faction naturally flocked to the King of Shu. He was a force that could not be ignored. Once a side was chosen in the imperial court, it could not be easily reversed. If the King of Shu was promoted, it would be of great benefit to them. At this time, they would naturally help him wholeheartedly. An official looked at Prime Minister Qin helplessly and asked, Prime Minister, is this really done by your Highness? After today, many people in the imperial court would point their fingers at the King of Shu for the mastermind behind the case. If they allowed it to develop, it would be extremely disadvantageous to them. Prime Minister Qin took a sip of tea and said, His Majesty has already ordered the Supreme Court to investigate this matter. The facts will naturally come to a conclusion, so don't spread rumors. That is true, but there are already similar rumors in the imperial court and among the people. If we ignore this, I am afraid it will damage the King of Shu's reputation, the official said again. As soon as he said this, many people lowered their heads in silence. The King of Shu was the Rat King. What reputation did His Highness have now? They were already used to the fact that His Highness would do something to tarnish their reputation every few days. In the crowd, Chen Chong muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "The rumors among the people must be stopped. Once found slandering a prince, they must be punished severely. Lord Chen is right. Such rumors must not be allowed to continue spreading." Chen Chong represented the Duke Chen residence. As the Minister of Rights, he had a high status in the imperial court. As soon as he said this, there were people who agreed. "I am afraid we will have to ask Lord Chen of the Ministry of Rights to speak on this matter. After all," someone else said. Suddenly he asked curiously, "Where is Lord Chen?" Another person said, "After Lord Chen returned home, he closed his doors and refused to see anyone. He did not come today." Hearing this, everyone's expressions changed. It was understandable that Lord Chen had lost his beloved son, but it was not normal for him to close his doors and refuse to see anyone. Could it be that he, thinking of the way Lord Chen looked at the King of Shu outside the palace today, they seemed to realize something. Lord Chen was one of them. If he was like this, what more the other officials in the imperial court? Everyone sighed silently in their hearts. "Your Highness, oh Your Highness, what are you doing? Are you really going to cause discord among everyone? Things have been too smooth for His Highness these past few years." Prime Minister Qin finally opened his mouth and said slowly, "As His Majesty's eldest son, he is the most qualified to inherit the throne. Furthermore, we have been helping him from behind. As a result, his morals have not been cultivated and he has become arrogant and willful. This is our fault." Hearing this, everyone's expressions turned complicated. Morals have not been cultivated. For Prime Minister Qin to use such words to describe him, it was clear what kind of person he was in Prime Minister Qin's heart. If they had known that this day would come, they would not have committed such sins in the past. But now, there was no turning back. Not long after, when everyone walked out of Prime Minister Qin's residence, the King of Shu looked at the returned invitation card on the table. His expression gradually darkened. "Your Highness Lord Chen, he. Scram, all of you, scram." Hearing the furious voice from inside the palace, as well as the sounds of tables toppling and plates shattering, the two maids standing outside the door looked at each other. Their faces were pale and their bodies trembled slightly. Wan Su walked on the street with his hands behind his back. Occasionally, he would stop and listen to the chatter of the people on the street. If he heard something interesting, he would stop for a moment and add a few words. Dressed in green, he looked like a scholar who had nothing to do. There were quite a few people dressed similarly to him in the various streets and brothels of Jingdo. Naturally, the people of Jingdo did not know that the person who had been laughing and chatting with them a moment ago, commenting on songs and listening to plays, was one of the imperial censors in the court. Because of a few words from them, a certain important figure had just been reported to the emperor this morning. Wan Su was in a good mood these days. Ever since his wife joined the women's union, he could buy the latest perfume at the internal price. His meager salary could finally be used up. Recently, there had been a lot of work at the imperial censorate. 2 days ago, an extremely bad case had occurred in the capital. The eldest son of the Minister of Rights had been killed, and the mastermind behind it had wanted to frame another important official of the court. There had not been such a bad case in the past 10 years. The Supreme Court and the Secret Intelligence Department were anxiously investigating the case. The eyes of the censors were also bright, staring at the most suspicious people, ready to go all out at any time. Of course, the identities of the people who might be involved in the case were extremely sensitive, including some princes. The censors did not dare to speak carelessly. Everything had to be based on evidence. The ancestral system cannot be abolished. The eldest son of the legitimate wife sits on the throne. Tianfa rises, his name spreads. The Jing kingdom rises, the virtuous are called kings. While he was thinking, a group of naughty children holding candied hawthorns in their hands whizzed past him. They were chattering non-stop and seemed to be singing some unknown folk song. What? The Jing kingdom rises, the virtuous are called kings. Wan Su only heard the last sentence clearly. He shook his head and prepared to leave, but his footsteps suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked in the direction that the children had left. His mouth was wide open and his expression was one of shock. When he came to his senses, he immediately chased after them with large strides. Chapter 561. Who taught you the ballad you just sang? Wansu finally caught up with the children on a street in the capital city and asked eagerly. It's a big brother I don't know. Those who can sing can get a candied haw. A child waved the candied haw in his hand and said with some pride. Wansu immediately asked again, where is he now? I don't know. He left a long time ago. A child said and then scattered in all directions. The ancestral system cannot be abolished. The eldest son of the legal wife will sit on the throne. The heavenly punishment rises and his name spreads. The Jing kingdom rises and the virtuous are called kings. Wansu stood there in a daze and watched the children go far away. The sound of the ballad still lingered in his ears. Something big is going to happen. Wansu murmured a few lyrics and thought to himself. The governor of the capital city, Lu Dayo, came out of his concubine's room. He was in high spirits and his face was radiant. He felt that his luck had been pretty good recently. Everything he did was smooth sailing. Whenever trouble encountered him, it would avoid him. He was not like that idiot from the Ministry of Justice who wanted money more than his life. He was simply courting death. Since the last case, the imperial court heavily regulated the public security, and the capital city had become much more peaceful. Even small theft cases did not happen. Without any cases, he lived a comfortable life as the capital city magistrate. However, every time he thought about how his subordinate from not long ago had now become the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, 2 ranks higher than him, he would have a strange feeling in his heart. These days, there were rumors about the king of Shu in the capital city. It was said that he was the mastermind behind the last case. Regarding this matter, the higher-ups had just put pressure on him to control it, so that it would not affect the reputation of the king of Shu. Control my ass. How could he control it when it was someone else's mouth? He even thought that it was the king of Shu who did it. However, although he complained, he still had to do some superficial work. He arrested a few people who spread the rumors publicly and locked them up for 2 days. Naturally, the voices of the people below would be reduced. He walked to the front hall and was about to deal with a case when he saw more than 10 farmers crowded in the hall. It seemed that they were arguing endlessly about something. He frowned and said, "No noise in the court." Before he came over, he had already roughly understood the situation. A dozen or so farmers were farming in their fields when a white fox with a piece of yellow cloth in its mouth ran past them. It could actually speak the human language, scaring the farmers. Although he was scared, he still had to catch a fox that could talk. This was an auspicious sign, a great auspicious sign. If he presented it to the authorities, he might be able to get a large sum of money. Wouldn't that be better than farming? Where's the fox? County Magistrate Lu asked as he waved his hand after the crowd quieted down. Sir, the auspicious sign is here. 2 farmers immediately carried a bamboo cage over. County Magistrate Lu took a few glances at it. It was just a fox. Although white foxes were rare, they were not auspicious. As for the fact that it could speak human language, it was completely nonsense. Say, this fox can speak. Let's hear it say something. County Magistrate Lu glanced at the crowd. A group of unruly people dared to use a fox to pretend to be an auspicious sign. If the fox couldn't speak, he would definitely beat them 10 times. What did they think the county government was? A tall and sturdy farmer smiled bitterly and said, "Sir, the fox really did speak." Many people heard it. If you don't believe me, you can ask them to come and ask. This commoner really can't command Xiang Qi. Oh, then tell me, what did the auspicious sign say? County Magistrate Lu was in a good mood today. At this time he was also interested. He walked over and sat down. He picked up the teacup and asked with interest. The auspicious sign said, "What did it say?" The farmer thought for a while. What did it say about a true dragon?" He turned his head with some doubts and asked the crowd, "What did the auspicious sign say at that time?" "I can't remember it." "It seems to be a true dragon." "What should a true dragon be?" "A true dragon should be the eldest." "I remember it. A true dragon should be the eldest son." "That's the sentence." They discussed for a while and came to a conclusion. The farmer who spoke just now walked forward and handed a piece of yellow cloth to County Magistrate Lu. He said, "Sir, this piece of yellow cloth fell from the auspicious sign's mouth when it spoke." At that time, the auspicious sign said, "A true dragon should be the eldest son. Make up, continue to make up." County Magistrate Lu looked at them with disdain. A piece of yellow cloth fell from the mouth when it spoke. Why didn't it drop gold? A true dragon should be the eldest son. How could they make up a sentence to fool the government? Did they really think that they were idiots? However, these farmers were illiterate, so the sentence they made up was quite smooth. A true dragon should be. What should a true dragon be? Clatter. Suddenly, as if he realized something, County Magistrate Lu's hand trembled unconsciously. The teacup fell and half a cup of hot tea splashed on his body. The tea was boiling hot, but County Magistrate Lu didn't feel it at all. He picked up the yellow cloth in his hand and looked at it carefully. On the back of it, he saw a lifelike 5-clawed golden dragon. His hand couldn't help but tremble again. "Come on, arrest all of them." After coming to his senses, he suddenly stood up from his seat, pointed at the dozen farmers, and said to the local government runners present. The dozen people were arrested by the local government runners before they realized what had happened. After coming to their senses, they turned pale and said loudly, Your Honor, what are you doing?" With a gloomy face, he asked coldly, "Tell me, who instigated you behind the scenes?" Seeing the county magistrate suddenly change his face, the farmers who wanted to ask for some rewards were terrified and said hurriedly, "Your Honor, we don't want the auspicious sign or the reward." At that time, many people really saw and heard it. You can ask them?" County Magistrate Lu looked at him and asked, "Where are those people?" They are all in the farm," the farmer said in a trembling voice. "Let's go." County Magistrate Lu walked down from the hall without even changing his clothes. He waved to the farmer and said, "Lead the way." "Are you done? Are you done?" While Li Yi was busy in the kitchen, the Tsundra Loli had popped her head out of the kitchen for the umpteenth time. Li Yi glanced at her and said, "What's the hurry? We still have to wait for another hour. You can play with Yongning for a while." Yongning is playing on the slide. That's for kids. I don't want to play. Sir, why don't we play chess? The Tsundra Loli said excitedly, "I know how to use Dumbo, Earth-Drilling Mouse, Tigger, and the super invincible celestial dog in the universe. Now even my father can't beat me." Without turning back, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "If you have nothing to do, go outside and see if the glutinous rice paper has dried. Remember, you are only allowed to eat 2. Okay." The Tsundra Loli ran out like the wind. She had been drooling over the thin but sweet food for a long time. Li Yi pinched a white square object from the plate and put it in his mouth to taste. The hardness was almost the same, but the sweetness was still a little too much. However, Xiao Huan, Yongning, and the Tsundra Loli would definitely like it. For the sake of their teeth, it was better to put less sugar next time. Mississippi Lu walked in from outside and said indifferently, "Mission completed. Is the person you found reliable?" Li Yi turned back and asked. Mississippi Lu didn't answer. She just gave him a disdainful look. Mississippi Lu was always reliable at crucial moments. Li Yi didn't ask any more. He passed a plate over and said, "Try this." Mississippi Lu took the plate and took a small piece from it. She looked at Li Yi and put it in her mouth. "What is this?" In the next moment, her beautiful eyes lit up as she looked at Li Yi. Li Yi thought about it and said, "You can call it Big White Rabbit." What a strange name. She pouted and turned to walk outside. "Wait." Li Yi stopped her just in time. Mississippi Lu turned back. "Let's go. Leave the plate behind." Li Yi crossed his arms and looked at her. "Mississippi." Lu stared straight at him. "The plate, I don't want the plate." After a moment, Li Yi took a step back and said, "You should at least leave me 2 pieces of sugar, right?" Chapter 562. The raw materials were not enough, and the specific formula was not clear. The taste of the homemade White Rabbit creamy candy was actually very different from what Li Yi remembered. It tasted similar to the pirated candies of White Rabbit creamy candy, Little White Rabbit creamy candy, and Big Black Rabbit creamy candy. However, Yongning ate it with relish. If Li Yi was not afraid that she would hurt her teeth, she would have eaten as much as Xiao Huan and the proud Lolita combined. Candy seemed to be still in its infancy in this world. It was possible to do it a little. If it continued to develop like this, there might eventually be a giant company that would monopolize many industries and cover countless categories. They could make tens of thousands of taels of silver every minute. Of course, to him, it was boring to be that big. It would take a lot of effort and a lot of time to sleep. The proud Lolita ran over, stuffed a piece of candy into his mouth, and ran away quickly. Li Yi lay on the rocking chair in the yard, listening to the two girls' clear but not noisy laughter. He would occasionally open his eyes to take a look. Life was already very good as far as he was concerned. On the other side of the capital, County Magistrate Lu, who was standing in a field with a dozen bailiffs behind him, was not so leisurely. This was where the villagers found the fox that could speak human language. At this moment, a villager was pointing at a series of footprints in the wetland and said, "Sir, look, the auspicious spirit ran from here today." County Magistrate Lu frowned and walked over to the villagers watching and asked, "Did you all see the auspicious spirit this morning?" Immediately, more than half of the villagers shook their heads, but some of them stood up and said, I saw it, that white fox. That auspicious spirit ran over here with a piece of yellow cloth in its mouth. After it ran over, the cloth fell out, and we all heard it speak." County Magistrate Lu frowned and asked, "How do you know it was the fox speaking and not someone deliberately pretending to be it?" A stooped old man with a face full of brown spots and a walking stick walked out and said, "Who in the village hasn't heard a fox's cry? That voice is sharp and thin. It's the voice of a fox. I can hear it clearly if it's a human's voice." County Magistrate Lu looked at the old man and asked suspiciously, "Sir, you must be over 70 years old this year. Do your ears still work?" "What? Old Zhao?" The old man knocked his walking stick on the ground and said, "My surname is Wang, not Zhao. I ate noodles this morning and it wasn't watery. The country's policy has been good these 2 years, so we don't drink watery food." County Magistrate Lu ignored the old man and turned to ask, "Who else was there besides you?" A villager thought for a moment and said, "There are 2 passers-by." He curled his lips and said, "Those 2 are outsiders, yet they want to buy the auspicious sign with 10 taels of silver. Do they think we're stupid? The auspicious spirit belongs to the country. If we really sell it, won't we go to jail?" "Passer-by?" County Magistrate Lu became spirited and asked, "What kind of passers-by? Do you still remember their appearance?" This time, he brought an artist with him. He immediately asked him to draw the passerby according to the villager's description. A moment later, holding 2 pieces of paper in his hand, County Magistrate Lu raised his eyebrows. One had a beard that almost covered his eyebrows, and the other had a birthmark the size of a bowl on his face. Needless to say, they must have disguised themselves. What was there to look for? "Go back to the county government," County Magistrate Lu said coldly and turned to leave. After all, he had gained something from today's trip. He had to think about how to deal with this matter after he went back. This was a big deal, and he couldn't make a mistake. "Hey, what do you think the auspicious sign meant?" "What did the auspicious sign say?" "I didn't hear it clearly this morning. I remember it said, the true dragon should be the eldest son Xian." "The true dragon? Isn't that the emperor?" "The eldest son, Xian, His Highness, King of Shu, should be called. Even the auspicious sign said so. It seems that the next emperor must be King of Shu." Before leaving, County Magistrate Lu's eyelids couldn't help but twitch a few times when he heard the villagers' whispers. The true dragon should be the eldest son, Xian. King of Shu, Li Xian, dared to say such rebellious words. Was he really crazy? "Your Honor, what should we do now?" Detective Zhao also realized the seriousness of this matter. When walking on the street, he finally couldn't help but ask County Magistrate Lu. County Magistrate Lu said in a deep voice, "Block the news. Don't let the villagers spread rumors. If they violate it, they will be directly put into the county government prison. The ancestral system can't be abolished. The eldest son of the legal wife will sit on the throne. Heaven's punishment will rise, and his prestige will spread far and wide. The Jing kingdom will rise, and the Xian will be the king." As soon as County Magistrate Lu finished his words, a group of children humming such a nursery rhyme passed by him. He stopped and suddenly turned his head. 2 people were chatting at a noodle stall by the roadside. "Hey, have you heard? This morning, a white fox with a yellow cloth in its mouth spoke human language and said that His Highness, King of Shu, should be the emperor. Really? This is a strange sign. The white fox spoke human language. It's a great auspicious sign. It said that King of Shu is incompetent. Today, we know that His Highness is destined to be the emperor. The people are stupid, but will His Majesty and all the officials be so easily deceived by such means? County Magistrate Lu sighed and rubbed his sore eyebrows. He didn't expect that things had developed to this point. Anyway, he couldn't handle it himself. Go back to the county government office. He gritted his teeth and walked quickly to the county government office. This kind of thing, a small capital magistrate couldn't participate in. The only thing he could do now was to write a memorial to the throne and report everything to His Majesty. When County Magistrate Lu bent over the table and wrote quickly, the atmosphere in the censorate was equally solemn. An extremely sensitive nursery rhyme spread among the people, and it had long been out of control. Today, the white fox presented auspicious signs, saying that King of Shu, Li Xiandang, would be the next emperor. Although His Majesty was ill, he was far from that point. King of Shu, or some people with ulterior motives, was going to rebel. At the end of the Qin dynasty, when Chen Shang and Wu Guang revolted, a strange sign appeared. A fox spoke human language. The great Chu dynasty will rise, King of Chen Shang. Now, the white fox also spoke human language and pointed out that King of Shu was the real dragon. The ancestral rule couldn't be abolished. The eldest legitimate son would inherit the throne. His Majesty didn't have a legitimate son. The eldest legitimate son would be King of Shu. When the Jing kingdom prospers, the virtuous will be the king. When Li Xiandang became the king, would the Jing kingdom prosper? There was even a saying among the people that a golden scale was originally a fish in a pond, but it would turn into a dragon when there was a storm. It secretly implied that King of Shu hadn't really become a dragon yet. Then, when the storm would change, would His Majesty die? Although King of Shu's reputation was almost ruined during this period, King of Shu himself or some people on his side dared to use this method. Did they ignore the fact that His Majesty was still alive? Fabricating strange signs, using folk songs to win the hearts of the people, and using religion to accumulate power. Since ancient times, almost all of these were things that rebels would do. Recently, there was a force making trouble outside the capital city, which claimed to be the holy religion. Could it be the arrangement of King of Shu? It seems that everyone has underestimated His Highness. Ma Zhongqing's face was as cold as frost. Auspicious signs, nursery rhymes, holy religion. You are familiar with these, but I'm curious, what other tricks do you have? Just as Ma Zhongqing finished his words, a censor came in from outside and cupped his hands. He said, Zhongqing, outside the capital city, a few farmers dug up an old stone tablet in the river. On it is written. What is written? Hearing this, Ma Zhongqing frowned. The censor glanced at him and said slowly, the dragon comes out of Shu, and the Jing kingdom will prosper. Chapter 563. Everyone is saying that His Highness is the Son of Heaven. In the King of Shu's mansion, two maids whispered to each other while doing their work. I've also heard about it. There seems to be a white fox that can talk and a stone tablet that was dug out from the river. It's a hot topic outside. I heard it when I went out to buy things today. The two maids chatted in low voices and did not realize that a figure was standing behind them. Ahem. At a certain moment, the King of Shu coughed softly. The two maids turned around in a hurry and their faces turned pale. They immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. Your Highness, please spare our lives. Your Highness, please spare our lives. Is I that scary? The King of Shu smiled and seemed to be in a good mood. He waved his hand and said, You two are not bad. Go and receive your rewards yourselves. Until the King of Shu limped away, the two maids were still kneeling on the ground and did not come back to their senses for a long time. His Highness disliked people talking behind his back and had even beaten a servant to death because of it. Why did he suddenly change his temper today? Did he take the wrong medicine? No matter what medicine His Highness took, he would not be punished. He hurriedly got up from the ground. As for the reward, how could it be more important than his own life? All the servants in the King of Shu's mansion could feel that His Highness was in a good mood today. He was even humming a tune as he walked. This was a rare sight in the mansion. It's rare to encounter such a good thing. Today, all the servants in the mansion will be rewarded. The King of Shu instructed the housekeeper of the mansion and planned to go out to have a look. He had been depressed for a few days because he had inexplicably taken the blame. However, it did not take long for him to take a turn for the better. These 2 days, the people were cheering for him to ascend to the throne. Compared to this, what was the ridicule and suspicion of the past few days? Could it be that even God is helping me? Not long after, he sat in the palanquin and listened to the occasional conversation on the street. He could not hide the smile on his face. The will of the people. Was that position still far away from him? At this moment, he felt that he was already standing at the peak. What, His Highness is not here? Outside the gates of the King of Shu's residence, a dozen or so ministers gathered. Upon hearing the words of the gatekeeper, they frowned at the same time. His Highness wasn't here at this time. What was he thinking? The Imperial Censorate had already submitted a joint petition to impeach His Highness for disrupting the politics of the court and bewitching the hearts of the people. They were afraid that what awaited them next would be the Emperor's thunderous fury. At this time, he was actually not in the manor? His foot injury hadn't healed yet. To the Qin Manor. He laughed loudly and said, "I'm in a good mood today. All expenses are on I." When the Jing kingdom rises, the virtuous are called kings. The true dragon should be the eldest son of the virtuous, and when there is a storm, he will turn into a dragon. Emperor Jing's face was red and his breathing was rapid. He swept the thick stack of memorials on the table and pressed one hand on his chest. He said angrily, "Bastard, I am not dead yet, and you are already so impatient." "Your Majesty, please calm down. The dragon's health is more important." Changde looked panicked. He put one hand on Emperor Jing's back and ran the genuine qi in his body. After a moment, Emperor Jing's breathing gradually calmed down. Emperor Jing touched his chest a few times and asked in a weak voice, "What's going on with the white fox and the stone tablet? Who is behind this? Have you found out?" Changde immediately said, "Your Majesty, the white fox is just an ordinary fox. The reason why those people heard it speak human language should be that someone imitated it with a vocal skill. As for the stone tablet, it is not difficult for a skilled stonemason to make it old." He pondered for a moment, then spoke again. "As for the person behind the scenes, all he did was bury a stone tablet, have someone imitate the fox's voice, and write a few ballads. He didn't need to do it himself, and the intelligence division wouldn't be able to investigate." Changde sighed. Such a low-cost, high-efficiency strategy gave people the impression that the other party did something with a wave of his hand. The whole court, the whole capital, and even the whole world were in chaos because of this. It really made people feel helpless. However, it did not matter who the person behind the scenes was because everyone knew his purpose. First, he murdered the son of an imperial official and framed Li Yi. Then, he spread rumors to create momentum for the King of Shu. Who was behind this? Was there a need to guess? When the dragon comes out of Shu, the Jing kingdom will rise. Emperor Jing's face was gloomy. He took a few deep breaths and said coldly, "In that case, let him stay in Shu." Changde glanced at Emperor Jing, who was already drafting a decree. After a moment, he said again, "Your Majesty, Lu Yi has found something about the murder of the son of the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights." "Have you found out who is targeting Li Yi?" Emperor Jing asked faintly without raising his head. "The more you do, the more mistakes you make. I admire Uncle Li more and more." Changde sighed softly, then shook his head and said, "When I was investigating this case, I accidentally found some clues that led to new developments in the matter from 20 years ago." The brush in Jingdi's hand paused and he slowly raised his head. "Speak." Chapter 564. Changde's voice was erratic like a ghost, which made the atmosphere in the hall quite gloomy and horrible. Emperor Jing clenched a memorial in his hand and said, "So, that thing was really done by them?" "That's probably it," Changde said, "but it's more than that. If we follow that clue, I'm afraid more people can be found." "Then keep digging." Emperor Jing's voice gradually became cold. "I won't let go of anyone who participated in that matter." After he finished speaking, the entire hall fell into a deathly silence. Until there was a creaking sound, the door of the hall was pushed open a little, and the sunlight outside shone in. A head poked in from outside, and the proud Lolita said with some doubt, "Why don't you open the door in broad daylight?" Her body flashed and appeared in the hall. She trotted over with a smile and said, "Father, I have something good for you to eat." "What good thing did you steal from the catering company again?" A smile appeared on Emperor Jing's face and he held her in his arms. "Father, try it first." The proud Lolita took out a handkerchief from her arms and carefully opened it. She took out a small milky white pastry and put it in Emperor Jing's mouth. "It tastes good. Is it a new pastry made by the catering company?" Emperor Jing asked with a smile on his face. The proud Lolita curled her lips and said, "Those stupid royal chefs can't make such delicious things. This was made by Master. Hey, give me 2 more pieces. I'll go to find my mother. She hasn't tasted it yet." Seeing her skipping out, the smile on Emperor Jing's face lasted for a long time. Changde picked up the memorials scattered on the ground and organized them. He said, "Your Majesty, do you want the Secret Intelligence Office to investigate the King of Shu?" "No need." Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "Li Xian can't do such a thing, but some people can't wait." Feeling the coldness in his words, Changde knew that some people would not have a good time in the court tomorrow. "Prime Minister Qin, what should we do now that things have come to this?" In Qin's mansion, many people were staring at Prime Minister Qin. Fortune and misfortune, misfortune and fortune. Qin Xiang sighed and said, "You don't need to do anything, and you can't do anything." He shook his head and walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. His body was even more hunched than before. Was the decision he made more than 10 years ago right or wrong? At this moment, even he himself had deep doubts about it. He walked to the door and waved his hand at a person standing in the corridor, saying, "Tell Imperial Concubine Chui that I am powerless in this matter." "Did you find it?" In the King of Shu's residence, more than 10 officials were waiting anxiously. When they saw a servant coming in, someone immediately asked, "Not yet." The servant shook his head and said helplessly. Everyone's faces were filled with panic. Time was of the essence, and the consequences of every 15 minutes they wasted might be even more severe. Unable to find the King of Shu, someone had already entered the palace to report to Concubine Chui. No one knew what the outcome would be. If Her Highness still did not return, it would be too late when the palace doors closed today. Even they couldn't help but feel a chill when they thought about what would happen in the morning assembly. At this moment, a maidservant hurriedly ran in and said, "Her Highness is back." Hearing this, everyone got up and quickly walked out of the hall. The King of Shu was supported by 2 servants. His eyes were hazy and his body was swaying. When he saw everyone coming out to greet him, he was stunned for a moment. Then he asked doubtfully, "Why are all of you here?" Then, as if he had thought of something, a smile appeared on his face. He said, "I know, you are also here to congratulate I." "Good, good. Give the order to hold a banquet in the king's residence tonight." "Your Highness." Everyone was already anxious. In such a critical situation, they were burning with anxiety in the king's residence while the King of Shu was enjoying himself outside. Finally, someone couldn't help but shout angrily with a face full of anger. "Ah!" The King of Shu raised his head in confusion, not knowing why the other party was angry. The official's face was full of disappointment as he said, "Your Highness, if this continues, your position in the Eastern Palace will be in danger." "What?" The King of Shu was very sensitive to these 2 words. He instantly sobered up and asked anxiously, "What happened? Why is it like this?" He thought that the position was within his reach, but now someone told him that he might not be able to be the emperor. How could he not be anxious? Seeing that the King of Shu still hadn't realized what the crisis was, the hearts of everyone present turned cold on the spot. The King of Shu was very lucky. Because the empress had no legitimate son and could no longer bear children, he, who was born by noble concubine Chui, was equivalent to the eldest son of the legitimate wife. He was the first in line to be the next emperor. His mother was noble concubine Chui, and he had the backing of the Chui family, as well as many noble families who shared the glory and disgrace of the Chui family. Because of these factors, many officials in the imperial court had long been on good terms with him. Even the current prime minister did not shy away from supporting him. He could even stay in the capital city without going to his fief. These were all things that the other princes combined did not have. However, he was also unlucky. From the moment he knew what an emperor was, He knew that he would be the emperor in the future. He could be the emperor without doing anything. As a result, he had never thought of making progress and was content with enjoying life. As long as he was a playboy of the royal family, there would be people who would help him. The king of Shu was broad-minded and recruited talents. He was proficient in both literary and military strategies. He was the best candidate to become the crown prince. That was why he was today's idiot. It was a blessing and a curse. At this moment, everyone understood what Prime Minister Qin meant. The official said in a low voice, "We'll talk about this on the way. Now, you should immediately go to the palace and ask for forgiveness from His Majesty. There may still be a chance to turn things around. Otherwise, something big will happen." Even though there were still many things he couldn't figure out, there was one thing he knew better than anyone else. If he didn't do as the other party said, he might really lose the throne. At this moment, he had completely sobered up from the wine he drank last night. The complacency he had during the day was also swept away. He hurriedly said, "Prepare the horse, hurry, prepare the horse. I want to go to the palace." A moment later, a flustered and exasperated voice came from outside the palace gate. Why don't you let me in?" The leader of the imperial guards in charge of guarding the palace gate looked at the king of Shu and said, "Your Highness, the palace gate is closed now. If you want to enter or leave, you must have His Majesty's token. If you don't have it, please wait a moment, Your Highness. We will send someone to inform you immediately." The king of Shu glared angrily, his eyes bloodshot. "Open your dog eyes and take a good look. I am the king of Shu. How dare you stop me?" "I'm sorry, this is my duty." The leader took a step back. The imperial guards beside him had already surrounded him according to a certain formation. No matter who the other party was, they would not be polite to anyone who trespassed the palace gate. "Send someone to inform him immediately. Tell him that I have an urgent matter to discuss with my father." The king of Shu walked to the side of the palace gate and looked at the night sky. His expression was incomparably ferocious. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Who is it that is trying to harm me?" "Of course it's me." Li Yi looked at Mississippi Lu and said firmly, "Who else can think of such a high-end name? I will call it White Rabbit. Don't even think about Rui Candy and Little Ring Candy." Chapter 565. This time, he would not compromise even if he was beaten to death. Big White Rabbit was Big White Rabbit. No matter where she went, she would be Big White Rabbit. Mississippi Lu did not bother to argue with him and asked, "Are you going to the palace tomorrow?" He could not miss such a big show. Li Yi nodded and said, "Yes, I should go to the palace tomorrow morning. Then help me return these secret books to Emingzu." Mississippi Lu walked over and put the books on the table beside her. "Okay," Li Yi responded. When she was about to walk out, he suddenly asked, "Why did you think of letting someone learn the fox's voice? If someone found out, it would be self-defeating." According to his original plan, he would only let the fox hold a piece of yellow cloth in its mouth. Mississippi Lu's move was even more ruthless. She was a good seedling for rebellion. Mississippi Lu glanced at him and said, "Who said that talking must be done with the mouth?" After a moment, Li Yi shook his head. He had actually forgotten about ventriloquism. For some people they could speak without using their mouth. Not to mention those people in the martial arts world, there was no lack of such talents in the brothel. The servant girl was still disappointed at the side. The son-in-law would rather give the delicious food the name of a rabbit than the name of Xiao Huan. When she heard what he said just now, she immediately forgot about this matter and asked curiously, son-in-law, can foxes also speak?" Li Yi turned his head and said with a smile, "Yes, have you not heard of the nine-tailed fox?" What is the nine-tailed fox?" The servant girl suddenly widened her eyes. Li Yi lowered his voice and said, "According to the legend, in a place called Green Mountains, there is a fox with 9 tails. It only eats beautiful young girls like you." The servant girl's face turned pale. She immediately leaned to this side and grabbed his arm. She raised her head again and asked in a low voice, "Then what happened?" After an hour, Li Yi gently pushed away the little servant girl who was curled up in his arms. He could not continue telling this story. If he continued, it would become torture. He did not know if it was because she had eaten well in the past year, but the little servant girl who used to have a flat figure had not only become more beautiful, but her figure had also changed greatly. Hugging her like this for a long time, he really could not hold himself back anymore. The servant girl was a little scared after the son-in-law told the story of the fox spirit. She planned to sleep with second miss at night. When she walked into her room with the quilt, in the palace, a woman in palace dress also walked into a palace. Her face was extremely gloomy. All the eunuchs and palace maids in the palace held their breath and did not dare to breathe. Presumably, since the imperial consort did not see His Majesty this time, they had to be even more careful. At this time, even the slightest mistake would lead to severe punishment. The eunuch showed a helpless expression and said, "Your Highness, Prime Minister Qin said that he was powerless in this matter." Powerless? The eunuch showed a helpless expression and said, "Your Highness, Prime Minister Qin said that he was powerless in this matter." Powerless? The voice of the woman in palace dress suddenly became shrill. What do you mean powerless? Why didn't he think about the reason why the Qin family could be like this today? This time, my son is in trouble. Does he want to stand by and do nothing? Don't forget, if something happens to my son, they will not have a good ending. Hearing these words, the eunuchs and palace maids in the hall lowered their heads even more. Father, it's cold outside. Go back inside. In the Qin manor, Prime Minister Qin was sitting alone in the courtyard. Someone came from behind and put a piece of clothing on his shoulder. It's okay. My old bones can still hold on for a few more days. Prime Minister Qin waved his hand and said, "How is his body?" The middle-aged man knew who he was talking about. He shook his head and said, "Old injuries have not healed, and new ones have come. The imperial doctor said that he needs to rest well. If there is another accident, I'm afraid that it will hurt his foundation." The middle-aged man paused and said, "Father, if you ask for leave tomorrow, I'm afraid it will be difficult to explain to concubine Cui and the Cui family." Over the years, the Qin family had been able to maintain a stable position in the imperial court. Most of it was due to concubine Cui and the Cui family's efforts in the imperial court. Otherwise, the once illustrious Qin family would probably only have one prime minister. Once his father retired, the decline of the Qin family would become inevitable. It was not wise to offend concubine Cui, the Cui family, and the king of Shu who was likely to succeed the throne. It would also make the Qin family's many years of hard work go to waste. No matter how prominent a family is, after a few decades or 100 years, it will almost exhaust its luck. Someone has to fight for it, otherwise it will not be able to be prominent for hundreds or even thousands of years. Prime Minister Qin did not answer. He looked at the night sky and said, "I'm old. In the future, these things should be left to these young people." Looking at his father's lonely and desolate back, he slowly walked into the room. The middle-aged man seemed to realize something, and his body trembled slightly. Today's morning court was destined to be unusual. The white fox spoke, the stone tablet revealed words, and the sensitive song could even be sung by 5-year-old children in the capital. In the past 2 days, several matters had almost turned the capital upside down. The king of Shu had become a legend among the people. The body of a true dragon, the person chosen by the heavens, and the only candidate to inherit the throne. It was almost said that the emperor should give up the throne to him as soon as possible. In the current situation, such a move was extremely stupid. Almost all the censors in the imperial censorate submitted a joint petition. Dozens of ministers in the court impeached him at the same time. Prime Minister Qin asked for leave, and no one in the king of Shu's faction dared to speak out under such circumstances. One person impeached, then stepped down, and another person took over. The entire court was in order. The emperor's expression had been very calm, as if there was no difference from the usual morning court. He calmly issued some edicts. The Cui family, the Chen family, the Qin family. The change of positions of more than 10 officials in the court showed what kind of storm was brewing behind this calm. The efforts of the king of Shu's faction over the years had gone up in smoke in this calm, but no one raised any objections. Everyone knew the seriousness of this matter, but no one knew how long the emperor's calmness would last. Perhaps because of someone's words or action, the emperor would explode. At that time, it would be a real thunderbolt. After that, another decree stirred up another storm in everyone's hearts. As a grown-up prince, the king of Shu would go to the land of Shu today. After that, he could not return to the capital without an imperial edict. This was already an extremely serious punishment. With this imperial edict, The King of Shu's advantage over the other grown-up princes was almost negligible. Without the capital and the center of power of the Jing kingdom, what qualifications did he have to fight for power? His influence in the imperial court had been sharply reduced, and the King of Shu had been directly banished from the capital. How much effort would the King of Shu's faction have to expend to dispel the heavy dark clouds above his head and re-establish his advantage? Of course, there was another extremely serious matter that they did not think about in detail. At such a critical moment for the King of Shu, Prime Minister Qin, as the core figure of the King of Shu's faction, did not go to the court? Not to mention that in a short period of one night, he could not even go to the court. Even if he was really sick, there should be a memorial to the throne. Could it be that Prime Minister Qin had given up on the King of Shu? For a moment, everyone was even more flustered. Li Yi did not have so many messy things to think about. He looked at the proud Lolita and then at Monarch Jean, who had swallowed a lot of saliva, and said, "Can't you give him a piece?" The proud Lolita held a box in her hand and said aggrievedly, "I don't have many pieces left." Although she said so, she had already opened the box, took out a piece of milk candy, and handed it to Monarch Jean. Chapter 566. The Emperor was sick, but he expelled the most qualified prince from the capital. No matter how one looked at it, it was an absurd thing to do. Not to mention how much turmoil it would cause in the imperial court, it might even cause some panic among the people. However, the King of Shu's actions had indeed violated a great taboo. The officials were not surprised by the emperor's decision. No matter what, the throne still belonged to the emperor. Although it might belong to the King of Shu in the future, the emperor did not give it to the King of Shu, and the King of Shu could not take it. Using actions that were no less than a rebellion to build support for himself, ultimately leading to this result. This time he was not wronged at all. Leaving just like that? Li Yi sighed, his tone somewhat sorrowful. This was not the usual small squabble. The King of Shu was rebelling. Dragging him out to be beheaded was not an extravagant hope. No matter what, he had to be stripped of his title, demoted to a commoner, and exiled for 3,000 miles, never to return to the capital. The old emperor was still too benevolent. He lacked the boldness of an eternal emperor. This was not the first time he felt this way. Just as he was about to return home after watching the show, he saw a figure limping towards him from afar. Li Han was stunned for a moment, then immediately said, "Greetings, imperial brother." The King of Shu's expression was dull. He raised his head and looked over. Even when he saw Li Yi and Li Xian, his expression did not change much. After all, compared to what had just happened to him, some things were not worth mentioning. Seeing the King of Shu's head lowered, not even looking at him, Li Han scratched his head in confusion and waved. "Farewell, imperial brother." It would be difficult to see him again. Li Yi shook his head and turned to walk out of the palace. The arrogant Lolita shouted from behind, "Sir, wait for me, I'll go back and get a big box." After becoming a young lady, the old emperor seemed to have really relaxed his discipline towards the arrogant Lolita. Her treatment gradually became closer to that of the Princess Royal, and she did not even need to specially report when she left the palace. Outside a certain palace, while waiting for her to enter to change her clothes and get a big box, she inadvertently glanced sideways and saw an arched door. 2 eunuchs dragged a person out and walked past her. That person must have been caned. His back was broken, and he seemed to be exhaling more than he was inhaling. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. A place like the Imperial Palace looked bright and majestic, but in fact, there were many dark and dirty things happening in the dark. Not only did the concubines fight openly and covertly, but sometimes even the princess would be involved. Yongning and the Tsundra Lolita were still young. When they grew up, they would more or less come into contact with some things. With their abilities, they would not be able to fight against those people. After 2 years, when the Princess Royal Highness moved out of the palace, the two of them, especially Yongning, would really make people worry. While he was thinking about these things, a dozen eunuchs and palace maids stood in the courtyard of a palace not far from here. Their heads were lowered, their bodies trembling, and they were as silent as cicadas in winter. Early this morning, the imperial consort had smashed all the precious vases in the hall. One of the servants who went in to clean up the mess had been whipped dozens of times on his back and fainted. Even the King of Shu had been slapped by the imperial consort and scolded for almost an hour. At this moment, no one dared to approach the door. "We haven't lost yet." In the empty hall, The woman in the palace dress smashed the last precious porcelain and took out a sealed envelope from her sleeve. She said, "Go out of the palace and personally deliver this letter to the master. In addition, let him ask what the Qin family wants." "Yes, Your Highness." A sharp voice came from the darkness. Someone walked out, responded, and soon disappeared from the hall. Although the imperial court was far away from ordinary people, some major events in the imperial court could not be hidden from the people of the capital. They did not know about the demotion or transfer of some officials, but the news that the king of Shu was about to leave the capital and go to his fief spread like a whirlwind throughout the capital not long after the morning court session ended. After all, the king of Shu was a hot topic in the capital recently. From being ridiculed by the public and being called Rat King to the series of omens, it all showed that he was the real son of heaven. His reputation rose, and he was expelled from the capital today. In just a few days, he had experienced many twists and turns. Even the vendors in the market would talk about it when they had nothing to do. Didn't they say that the throne is going to be passed on to the king of Shu? Why was he suddenly expelled? What succession? Who did you hear it from? Everyone said it. Even the fox said that the king of Shu should be the emperor. How can it be false? Nonsense. How can you believe that? Everyone knows that those things were done by the king of Shu himself. Whoever believes that is a fool. What? It was all done by the king of Shu himself? Of course. Otherwise, why would he be expelled from the capital? If you ask me, he is too impatient. In just half a day, the truth of the matter began to spread among the people. After praising the king of Shu for a few days, people realized that the Rat King was still the same Rat King. He had not changed at all. He had done so many things to deceive them. At this time, outside the capital, in a luxurious carriage, an old man sitting in the front took out an item from his bosom, lifted the curtain, and handed it to the king of Shu. He said, "Just in case, the imperial consort and the Cui family have been operating in Shuzhou for more than 10 years. Your Highness, if you let them read this letter, the officials and nobles of Shuzhou will make things convenient for you." Prince he. The king king. I he. I. If you can't do this well, you don't have to come back. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 riders separated from the crowd and soon disappeared. In a small courtyard in Willow Lane in the capital. I heard that the king of Shu will leave the capital today. Xiaotsue and Xiaozhu were swinging in the corner. Wan Ruoqing was drying the osmanthus powder at the stone table in the courtyard and said to Zhang Zumo. They saw it when they passed by the alley just now. Zhang Zumo was focused on peeling melon seeds and said casually, "Last time they were framed and almost imprisoned." After coming to the capital, all kinds of rumors pointed to the king of Shu. How could they not know that he was leaving the capital today? Since they knew that they were likely to be targeted by a prince, they were still very nervous. Only now did they let out a long sigh of relief. Wan Ruoqing and Zhang Zumo were talking about something. Xiaotsue swung for a while and came over to help her move the osmanthus powder to a place where the sun was shining. She wondered why Sister Ruoqing had picked so many osmanthus flowers this year. The osmanthus cake would probably last until this time next year. It was already late autumn, and the atmosphere between heaven and earth was more desolate. The small courtyard was very clean, but the alley outside the courtyard was already covered with a layer of fallen leaves. Not long after it was cleaned, it would be covered again. It was hard to imagine that there would be a tea house in such a secluded alley. Although the place was remote, business was brisk every day. Many people in the capital knew that the owner of the tea house in Willow Lane was an expert in stir-frying tea. Although the price was a little high, it could attract people who truly loved tea. At the entrance of the tea house, there would always be a lazy waiter sitting there. No matter how busy the business was, he would not go in to help. Most of the time, he was dozing off. He would only open his eyes when someone approached the small courtyard on the opposite side. "Hey, those 2 beggars, if you want to beg, go elsewhere." At a certain moment, the tea house waiter stood up and walked over to the 2 beggars who had been lingering there for a long time. He waved his hand and spoke impatiently. "Why?" One of the beggars said unhappily and was immediately pulled away by his companion. In terms of size, the tea house waiter's arms were thicker than their thighs. If they really provoked him, a fierce beating was inevitable. Seeing that the two beggars had tactfully left, the waiter returned to his original position and continued to nap. At this time, in a corner outside the alley, two beggars were talking in low voices. That should be where the Empress lives. The great emissary said that that is the incarnation of the Empress. We must not disturb her. We also have to tell everyone that if we encounter her in the future, we must not offend her. Let's go back and report to the great emissary first. We found the Empress. The night deepened, but the moonlight was quite bright. The entire capital was enveloped in a layer of brightness. At a certain moment, over 10 figures suddenly appeared in the alley. With the help of the moonlight, it could be seen that everyone was dressed in black and their faces were covered with black cloths. The person in the lead was leaning against the wall of a certain courtyard. He looked inside coldly, raised a hand, and gently waved it down. His Highness has ordered that no one be left alive. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped high up into the air and climbed onto the courtyard wall. The people behind him murmured and quickly approached the corner of the wall. Whoosh! A voice suddenly rang out in everyone's ears. Then, there was a sharp whistle in the darkness, followed by the dull sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The person who had just spoken fell from the courtyard wall. An arrow entered the back of his neck and pierced through his throat. He clutched his neck and after struggling a few times, there was no more movement. An arrow to the throat. Whew! After the shock passed, the remaining people immediately became vigilant. With their backs to the courtyard wall, they looked in the direction of the voice. A person holding a bow and arrow jumped down from a nearby tree. The doors of a few houses in the alley opened at the same time. Multiple figures quickly flashed out from inside. Who are you? The few people asked coldly as they faced the person holding the bow and arrow from afar. Kill. The other party did not answer. After a moment of dead silence, someone spoke coldly. Then, there was the dazzling light of weapons being unsheathed. All of you step back. I'll do it. A person on the other side laughed loudly. He did not fear the dozen people at all. He took out a long knife from his back and charged forward. Stop trying to be a hero. These people's target are the two ladies. Kill them as soon as possible. Remember to leave them alive. The people behind him really didn't help. Instead, they spread out and each person guarded a direction. There were two elites from the heaven rank, and the others were all at the top of the earth rank. There was also a famous master archer in the Jianghu holding the line. If they could not even deal with these small fries, how could they have the face to stay on the hero ranking? Chapter 568. Under the moonlight, the figure wielding the long saber was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. The saber light danced as if it was chopping melons and vegetables. There was not even the sound of weapons clashing. None of the dozen or so black-clothed men were a match for him. As for the man with the longbow, it did not affect his performance at all. He stood in front of the courtyard gate. If someone broke through the defense line of the swordsman, he would casually shoot an arrow. With the sound of the bowstring, someone would fall to the ground, clutching his throat. After twitching a few times, there was no more sound. The strange thing was that these people knew they were no match for him, but they did not seem to care. They charged forward without fear of death, even if they were just throwing their lives away. Death warriors? The people surrounding them looked at each other, nodded slightly, and quickly joined the battle. In just a moment, only one of the dozen or so black-clothed men was left standing. A man grabbed the neck of the leader and asked coldly, "Who sent you?" After he asked this question, there was no response for a long time. At this moment, someone walked over and put his finger under the nose of the black-clothed man. He shook his head and complained, "You brat, you don't know how to hold back. He's already been strangled by you, why are you still asking?" The man released his hand, and the black-clothed man's corpse fell straight to the ground. He squatted down and pinched the man's mouth. He stood up, shook his head and said, "He committed suicide by taking poison. Who would be so generous as to send so many death warriors at once?" After years of traveling in Jianghu, they naturally knew of the existence of death warriors. Those nobles' families would usually raise death warriors. These people would work for their master and were instilled with the idea of loyalty from a young age. For the master's orders, they could even disregard their lives and carry out most of the missions were assaults or assassinations. Although these people also had their own thoughts, They only knew to be loyal. Even if they learned martial arts from a young age, their achievements were extremely limited. However, when there were a lot of them, their fearless aura would give people a headache. Today, if it were not for the two heaven-ranked experts and the godly archer, the remaining people would not be able to stop them. The blade-wielding man frowned and said, "Call someone over and clean this place up." Before they could do anything, the sound of footsteps came from the entrance of the alley. More than 10 figures quickly walked over. As they got closer, they saw the corpses on the ground. Someone immediately pressed the weapon on his waist and shouted, "Who are you people?" When they saw another person appear, their expressions finally changed. The blade-wielding man saw a gray-robed old man in the crowd and involuntarily clenched the long blade in his hand. He glanced at the person beside him and the latter immediately understood. He took 2 steps back and took out a bamboo tube from his waist. "And who are you?" The man nodded as he looked at the figures in front of him and asked. "This is the work of the Secret Intelligence Bureau. Put down your weapons immediately." Seeing that the courtyard door behind them was not open, the Secret Intelligence Division General who had spoken was slightly relieved. He turned to look at the person opposite him and immediately said, "Secret Intelligence Agency?" Hearing these 3 words, the expression of the knife-wielding man visibly relaxed, but he still looked at him suspiciously and asked, "The Heavenly King covers the Earthly Tiger? We're on the same side." When the people of the Secret Intelligence Division heard this, they immediately put down their weapons. The general was about to step forward when he saw the man opposite him raise his long blade in front of him. After a moment of shock, he said, "Chicken stewed with mushrooms." When the man heard this, he put away his blade and cupped his hands in salute. "Excuse me." The general shook his head and pointed at the corpses on the ground. "It's fine. We should be more vigilant. What exactly is going on here?" "They're all men of sacrifice." The man glanced at them and said, "Coming at this time should mean harm to the 2 ladies. Since the Secret Intelligence Division is here, I'll leave the rest to you to handle." "That's how it should be." The general nodded and waved his hand at the people behind him. "Bring the corpses back." The emperor attached great importance to the case of the son of the vice minister of the Ministry of Rights. He had strictly ordered the Secret Intelligence Division and the Supreme Court to solve the case within a time limit. However, they had not obtained any useful clues from the Assistant Minister of Justice, so the case had not been solved. The Secret Intelligence Division had been paying attention to the movements here, which was why they had been able to arrive so quickly after discovering the abnormality. Although they had arrived a step too late and there were only corpses left, for the Secret Intelligence Division, it made no difference whether they were corpses or living people. "It's all thanks to you tonight." The general cupped his hands in salute again. One could imagine that if it weren't for these people, if something had happened to the 2 ladies, not to mention how they would explain it to Lord Li, the punishment from the emperor would probably not be light. The man waved his hand and said, "You're too polite. Our duty is to protect the 2 ladies. However, you need to carefully investigate the identities of these people." The general smiled and said, "Don't worry. Leave the rest to us." His Majesty's power in the imperial court was almost completely wiped out and almost reached a critical limit. If he suppressed them too much, there would be a big rebound. Emperor Jing thought for a moment and asked, "Is there a vacancy for the position of Minister of the Ministry of Rights?" Chongda said, "His Majesty just demoted the Minister of the Ministry of Rights the day before yesterday. He hasn't been appointed yet." Emperor Jing thought for a moment and said, "Forget it. Chen Yunshan is the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. He is no longer loyal to the Chen family. Pass down the order to the Ministry of Personnel. Chen Yunshan will be appointed as Minister of the Ministry of Rights." Chapter 569. The promotion of the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Rights, Chen Yunshan, was expected by most people. Although the Supreme Court and the Intelligence Bureau had not come to a conclusion on the death of Chen Yunshan's son, it was clear that the King of Shu was the culprit. As soon as the King of Shu left the capital, a dozen suicide soldiers attacked Willow Alley at night. The Intelligence Bureau's actions were seen by Marquis Wu, who was patrolling the streets. There was no way to hide this. However, being banished from the capital was a severe punishment for the King of Shu, who was likely to become the next emperor. His faction had also suffered a heavy blow. Now that he was far away from the capital, if he were to be recalled for investigation, it would cause turmoil in the political situation. The gains would not make up for the losses. After all, although the King of Shu's faction had temporarily lost power in the court, they still had influence that could not be ignored. Thinking about it carefully, the emperor still had a few adult princes. But even when the King of Shu was at his lowest point, the other princes could not compare to his advantage. Therefore, this case could only end here. Chan Yunshan's promotion from the Minister of Rights to the Minister of Rights was probably the emperor's compensation for him. But this road of promotion was too bloody and cruel. Chen Yunshan had already left the King of Shu's faction. It was said that he had almost fallen out with Duke Chen. This was not unexpected. Although he could not take revenge for his son's death, how could he let it go so easily and continue to be loyal to the King of Shu? Over the past few days, he was not the first nor the last to leave the King of Shu's camp. It was just that after this incident, many officials finally saw many things clearly. From indecisiveness they became firm. Even the attitude of the Qin clan had become vague, causing more people to hesitate. Suicide soldiers? Li Yi unconsciously tapped the table with his index finger, repeating Lu Luo's words. Yes. Lu Luo nodded. Last night, around midnight, a group of black-clothed men sneaked into Willow Alley. Fortunately, we knew that these days were not peaceful. Worried that they would make a move again, we arranged for people to keep watch every night. Those black-clothed men were not afraid of death. We wanted to capture one alive for questioning, but we did not expect the last person to commit suicide by poison. In the end, the corpses were all taken away by the Secret Service. We still don't know the identities of those people. There was nothing much to guess about the identity of the man in black. He did not know how to play tricks, nor did he know how to beat around the bush. Based on his style of doing things, he was undoubtedly the King of Shu. I'm still too soft-hearted. Li Yi sighed and shook his head. The nursery rhymes and the strange omens did not reach the bottom line of the courtiers and the old emperor. Otherwise, the King of Shu would not only be banishment from the capital. However, this guy had been in Jingdo for so long, yet he still hadn't managed to rope in any imperial guards or garrison generals. He also couldn't do anything fatal. A piece of trash. He looked at Lu Luo and asked casually, "We haven't developed a Shuzhou yet, have we?" Lu Luo nodded and said, "Shuzhou is remote. If we go a little deeper, we'll be within the borders of the Zhao Kingdom. We don't plan to develop in such a remote prefecture for the time being. The more difficult the conditions, the more we can't shrink back. We have to carry forward the spirit of not being afraid of hardship." Li Yi poured more tea for him and said, "Although Shuzhou is remote, we can't give it up. If anyone is willing to go to Shuzhou to develop, their salary will be tripled, and they will be allowed a month of paid leave every year. They will also be allowed to go home to visit family once." He counted the days and continued, "In 2 years, if they are willing to come back, they will immediately be promoted to the manager of the branch in Jingdo." This kind of treatment was hard to refuse for a wandering actor who called the 4 corners of the world his home. He would only be away for 2 or 3 years. Although Shuzhou was a little remote, the salary was not low. 3 times the salary, a month of leave, and they were allowed to go home to visit family. In this way, he would be gone for at least 3 months. Once the news got out, there would be a lot of applicants. Moreover, in 2 or 3 years, he would be promoted to the manager of the branch in Jingdo. He would not have to worry for the rest of his life. After coming back to his senses, Lu Luo nodded and said, "Okay, I'll arrange it as soon as I go back." "How's the preparation for the Heroes competition?" This rare event in the martial arts world would be held in a few days. Lu Luo had been in charge of this aspect. Lu Luo nodded and said, "The preparation is almost done. The ranking on the heaven list has rarely changed in the past 2 days. So far, there hasn't been a single grandmaster. But we can't rule out the possibility that some masters on the heaven list haven't done their best. When the real competition begins, there may be changes." After all, the area around Jingdo was too sensitive. The final venue of the Martial Arts Society competition was dozens of miles away from Jingdo. This competition was not only a competition, but also an exchange. Generally speaking, the martial arts world in Jianghu was an extremely powerful force. Unfortunately, it was like a plate of loose sand, which was difficult to gather. However, if they really gathered, the imperial court would have a headache. Ever since the appearance of the hero list, there had been a slight change in the situation. Although people who practiced martial arts were proud and arrogant, they also respected the strong. Once they were ranked at the top of the heaven list, once their fame spread out, a large number of followers would immediately emerge. Experts who were indifferent would not care about this, but there were also people who took the opportunity to establish their own forces. The number of factions in the martial arts world suddenly increased. Among them, the Lu Alliance was the most powerful one. After all, the top 2 masters on the heaven list were in the Lu Alliance. One of them was even a legendary grandmaster. The chance to receive guidance from a grandmaster was something that many martial arts practitioners dreamed of. Martial arts practitioners from all walks of life swarmed in from all directions. Even though the Lu Alliance's rules for accepting members were very strict, its expansion speed was extremely shocking. Ever since the appearance of the hero list until the heroes competition, the entire martial arts world was slowly stirred up. Although obtaining the position of the chief of the martial arts world might not be able to command the martial arts world, that title was the highest honor for martial arts practitioners. The chief of the martial arts world, the #1 master in the world, was enough to boast for a lifetime. Of course, no matter how much Li Yi fantasized about it, it was useless. However, Mississippi Lu's Tai Chi was taught by him step by step. A teacher for a day, a teacher for a lifetime. In the future, when he wrote a biography for her, he had to make it clear. The master of the chief of the martial arts world was a truly powerful existence. It would not be enough to boast for 2 lifetimes. The situation in the imperial court changed. Some people left, some people rose. For the people in the capital, this was just a topic of discussion. It didn't take long before something new appeared in 3 to 5 days, causing them to forget about the past. 2 days ago, they were still discussing how foxes talked and who should be the emperor. But these days, the topic of discussion had changed to a few new shows in the brothel. There was a pretty girl who sang and everyone liked her very much. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. In this tranquility, in a restaurant in the capital, a burly man with a saber on his back raised his head and drank a few mouthfuls of strong wine. He laughed. The capital is indeed the capital. Even the wine is different. Then he threw down a piece of silver, picked up the wine jar and strode away. Outside the capital, a young man with a sword in his hand stopped a passerby. After asking a few questions, he smiled and thanked the passerby. He looked in a certain direction and quickly disappeared. "Greetings, Your Highness." At the same time, a middle-aged Taoist nun wearing a loose Taoist robe walked out of the courtyard. The 2 people in purple who had been waiting outside the door immediately bowed. Countless figures were rushing toward a certain place outside the capital city. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.